Yo, what's up, everybody? I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, right now I'm not doing any kind of live stream for the podcast, but I do stream live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu if you want to catch me doing various other different types of content. But fear not, because the podcast is always uploaded under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu, as well as various podcasting platforms like Spotify for reviewing and listening pleasure. So please feel free to do that whole social media doobly-doo thing and leave that rating, like, follow, subscribe, review, whatever, depending on the platform that you're listening on. It really does help support the podcast. So today I am back with Tesero, and we got the bombshell that Bandai is going to be doing a ban and restriction update to the ban and restriction list. God, English is hard. So that's going to be the majority of what we're going to be talking about today. So if you want to, Tesero, introduce yourself for the fine folks at home.
Hello, I'm back again. This is tesero. Sorry for being gone last week, and not just from the podcast, but in general, I've been kind of a bit of a slump. Hoping to get over that in preparation for the new post ban list BT26 format. There's a lot to consider on like how much the meta will change after that.
Yeah, it's gonna be a quite interesting time because isn't BT26 coming out like next week or something?
Yeah, just basically at the end of this month. Yeah, is when pre-release starts, and then September is when the ban list comes into effect. So basically, BT26 is going to be a post ban list format for the most part.
Oh, that's right. Okay,
Hmm.
so that's definitely gonna cause some pretty big shakeups. Um, so as per usual, we do have the question of the week. So if you want your comments to be read about anything that we're going to be talking about in this episode, you already know what to do. This week's episode or podcast is brought to you by Green Hill Mario. Huge shout out to them for being a longtime watcher. So thank you, Green Hill, for your comment and all of your viewership. And with that, I think we were talking about reprints and accessibility, which I need to do like a more dedicated thing on. But Green Hill Mario states that it's a pretty lengthy comment, which I always like picking good ones. So Bandai are doing the Beelstar X reprint so quickly, relative to their usual methods that we learned for the next wave of store promos from the reprint list. They are also doing high rarity reprints for the 3 decks getting future support next month: Levia, Jesmon, and now confirmed to be Diaboromon, which we'll also talk a little bit about that when we get there. And also reprinting cards in regular slots that are meaningful, like Vortex, Heavy Metal, and supporting dual cards. And they're supporting those decks with dual cards. Jesmon and Examon and Royal Knights and X Antibodies going to be getting more support. They also think it's still silly that they're censoring Noir and CL, but that is what it is. And that's all dropping November 2nd, which is 2 months after EX13. So they are timing things a little bit better when it comes to their reprints. They're
Yeah.
only defending Bandai because this is a big change to their normal, which we kind of pointed out in the past that it is. They are trying to plan and prepare things a little bit better. And then
Mhm.
regarding LM sets, I don't know why it's just an NA exclusive thing that we have to buy from Bandai Premium, where everywhere else it is just another normal box. So thank you again, Green Hill Mario. I did kind of paraphrase a little bit of your comment. It really does mean a lot. So, um, Tesero, I know we talked back and forth about reprints, and this is going to hopefully try to wrap some of that up a little bit more, because we do have, I guess this will like leak into some news, where we do have the Diaboromon starter deck coming out. So, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on not only just how they've been handling reprints now that we have a little bit more information, but how do you feel about the Diaboromon starter deck?
I mean, they kind of teased the Diabormon Star Deck a while ago when they showed us that clock image in I forget which live stream it was. I think well it was one of their live streams from a while ago. So it's kind of it's just at this point just a confirmation. And I don't think we had any more info about it besides confirming that it was a Diaboro starter. I think so. I don't really have any new thoughts on it. Uh, I don't know. I'm curious to see what direction they're gonna take it now because we've kind of had a Diaboromon deck around for a while. It's not hasn't been like super meta relevant, but like it's somewhat playable with Diaboromon X and its overclocks. Um, Considering that they teased it with a clock image, maybe it might be more centered around the clock of the end. So it's curious to see, you know, what they would do to make that card, you know,
Mhm.
playable to any extent, or if maybe they're just gonna abandon that card and like think of a new strategy entirely.
I'm more for the latter. I think just like what we saw with Sakuyamon, it's going to be something like adjacent to what we currently had with
Mhm.
Diaboromon, where you could use some of the old tools to buff it up. But for the most part, it really just wants to be its own new self. And I think the timing of Diaboromon is going to be really, really good, or like at least like well thought out because of the X antibody sets that are up and coming. We know that
Right.
Seven Great Demon Lords is getting all of their X's in a single X antibody set, which means we're most likely going to get Ogudo X, which
Mhm.
plays in line with Diaboromon X, considering Diaboromon
Yep.
X digivolves into Ogudo X by lore
Right.
wise eating all of the seven great demon lords. So they could be prepping the deck to play towards that while having its own independent thing. I don't particularly know, but yeah, I'm in the camp that they're just going to completely abandon what Diabormon was doing in order to support a brand new playstyle. That's just Bandai's MO at this point. Stop playing the old, start playing the new.
Mhm. As for like the question about like how I feel about reprints, it's kind of complicated because some things about the reprints, at least the ones that were coming up in the future, is something that we're gonna have to talk about a bit more when it comes to the. It's something I want to bring up when we go to the when this podcast's main discussion, which makes things a little awkward. I'm curious to see what Bandai will do in regards to it, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Other than
Right.
that, like I don't know. He mentioned like it's weird that we don't get the LM sets. Like they're only P Bandai and not in like stores. I wonder if that might have something to do with how well the original like special limited set did because that was in stores. I remember correctly, right?
Yeah,
Do you
it
remember
was.
the special? So I wonder if maybe like that set did not do well enough for store owners for them to consider, you know, continuing to make LM sets a store thing as opposed to premium Bandai thing. And it also makes it and like since premium Bandai is like a pre-order thing, it kind of allows them to like gauge interest on like certain reprints in general. So like,
Yeah.
you know, people will buy those LM sets based on with whether or not they need reprints instead of them making a whole reprint box like with 81 and putting it out to stores and like hoping that that would sell, which is kind of like iffy because it's like the need for reprints is like on a person to person basis. There's like almost no such thing as a reprint that like literally everyone in the world would need.
Very few cards I would say hold that spot. And with the current trajectory of the game,
Right.
I can't even say that anymore with confidence. It's just like, oh, do we need a reprint of, let's just take BT16 Ukomon? Like, no, they're
Mhm.
designing decks to not need that type of a card anymore. And it's not just this unanimous card that goes into everything. Um, Certain cards I will say, like, and this goes to probably what you're alluding to also, where it's just like
Mhm.
certain hyper generic cards that would go into every single deck arguably are the cards that are most likely susceptible to getting a ban or limit because they've been lasting for too long, nothing's been able to replace them, and their effects are still incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, are we gonna reprint a like a limited card. In Bandai's perspective, yes, they 100% would do that. We literally just saw
They
them
have.
do that. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know if that's like a cool thing to do or if that's kind of like rubbing salt on the wound and being like insulting to your players in like the most subtle way.
Yeah. Also in terms of like the way they handle LM sets, I just got my LM8 in the mail yesterday. So I guess one thing that comes to mind when I was opening that set up was the fact that was the reprints that were specifically alt arts, right? Because all the non-alt art stuff, you're if you get 2 boxes, you're guaranteed to get a playset of everything, right? So I have all my playsets of all those reprints, arenas, trainings, everything. But the stuff that got alt arts, which were Oryukin, Arisa, uh, Medieval, and what was the last one? Heavy Metal Ace. Those are like you're not guaranteed those, right? Which can be a little
Correct.
frustrating because I was hoping to get some copies of Medieval Gallant. Even though that card isn't super relevant nowadays, I'm just a fan and I like Wichelny as like as a place. So I wanted Medieval Gallants for if eventually Wichelny becomes an archetype. And I got one, which is like great, cool. I got one, which is better than nothing. And I also ended up with like 2 Arisas, which I didn't care for because I don't play puppets, and that meant I ended up with 0 or you can ace, which I'm not like super miffed about, but I am a little bit miffed about because of the fact that that's an archetype that is about to get supported. So it's like that's like the one thing about LMs that I wish would change a little is like the premium reprints part about it. I'd love the if I'm gonna go out of my way to buy this premium product online, I'd kind of would like to have like it's nice that like a lot of cards of it are guaranteed, but I dislike the parts of it that aren't guaranteed, you know?
No, I get you. I didn't open my LM boxes yet because that was like one of the last few things that I did end up buying from Digimon physically. Um because it was what, 8 months ago that we had to pre-order it. My life was completely different 8 months ago.
Mhm.
So but I do feel like they are a little bit more aware when it comes to the LM sets of like, hey, we know X set is going to be supporting X deck, so we could
Mhm.
prepare a reprint that would be more meaningful. Granted, this time around it feels kind of just really awkward because, again, like you said, puppets nowhere to be seen. Um, Royal Knights is going to be getting support, but right now nowhere to be seen in terms of the competitive landscape of the game. Medieval
That's what I'm fine
Galamon,
with. I'm happy that I have my arenas in case I do want to play all force.
yeah, I think Rena is like the one of the best ones to speculate on. Um,
Yeah.
just because like we don't know what All Force is going to do, but we do know there's going to be a new Rena in the set, which means All Force is probably still going to be attached to Rena at the hip in terms of gameplay.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, so like Medieval Galmon just completely phased out. Just because of again just how much the game has changed. We went from a card that was like $70, a unanimous staple, pretty much played everywhere, to what, 10, 15? I don't actually know. I didn't look it up. Let alone what this version of the card is worth. So, like, it really goes to show that one, having a good reprint definitely makes cards more affordable and accessible, but two, the power creep of the game sometimes doesn't do the game any benefit, even when it's properly planned out.
Yeah.
Um,
That's crazy. It can also go in like the more extreme direction too, because the cover card of the next LM set is Bielstar X, and here we are in the ban prediction episode, and of course, what is like most more likely than anything to get hit, if not one of the most topping decks of the current format. So it's going to be another. It could be another instance of like that treatment coming just a little too late, right?
right. Because, like, oh, let's just say they hit something from Beelstar, and now the demand for the deck dramatically drops.
Hmm.
Or, like, it's just so severely kneecapped because they hit probably, like, maybe one of the better cards, that it
Hmm.
just can't function like it used to. So now it
Hmm.
just drives the demand of that card away when they unfortunately weren't necessarily anticipating that when they decided this was the reprint 8 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
But
So yeah, I don't know. There are parts about LM sets that are good, and then there's just like I think it's just like a logistical issue that like they probably just can't really, because of the fact that they have to like design these things so many months ahead of time. Like I don't know, unless they like figure out a new solution that doesn't have these issues. I think these kind of issues will always be a problem for designing reprints unless they find a way to upend the entire system and find a new way to do it.
right. And I still think one of the best suggestions that came from last week's conversation about that was no more small sets. So EX sets, just fill 30 cards with reprints. Like easy.
Mm,
And then like instead of chaff cards in sets, you just have meaningful reprints. Um that one's a little bit less so of like a thing. I really like the idea of just like no more small sets, because small sets do traditionally worse in not only just Digimon but every card game. Like, look at Magic as just one of the prime examples. Their small sets, which the last two were
mm,
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Spider Man, tanked. Absolutely did terrible. I heard Turtles was like okay, but Spider Man did really bad. And like part of the reason why a lot of Magic has changed in terms of how they're designing sets and like how their storytelling in sets goes was centered around small sets, where it's just like we had a big set, a medium set, and a small set. The small set being the end of like the three block structure, always performed the worst. So they were just like, okay, what happens if we cut that and we just have a big set and like a medium to small set, and then just repeat that forever. And then the small sets, spoiler, still did pretty bad. So now each set is its own contained story, and it's just a large set, and then they use the supplementary like smaller sets for other things. Um
mm.
yeah, it's really weird, but that's why like understanding that small sets just don't do well is like one of the big things I feel like pretty much no card game maker has actually learned. Um, and again, it's not exclusively just to Digimon.
Yeah, that's I have some complicated feelings about that too, because it's like on one hand, like I agree, especially after the last small set, that like small sets in general have felt pretty bad in a lot of ways. But at the same time, in Digimon, small sets is usually where they tend to like are able to explore like themes that which they tend to like kind of like they never would on a larger set. I love that we had a set for villain characters, a set for DM and stuff. Um, so it's like if losing small sets, if us losing EX sets also means losing out on these like cooler themes for sets, then it's like that's also a kind of a loss. Even though I'm also kind of agreeing that in general smaller sets have felt pretty bad
I mean, they don't have
in
to
a lot
lose
of
the
ways.
they don't have to lose the themes. Like they could still just be labeled as EX sets. It's just the expectation of what is inside of in an EX set is changed a little bit, where it's just like, okay, you do have let's just say a good handful of reprints. Um the only issue based on pull rates is if you introduce more SRs, then that can make things a little bit funky. So it is not like the perfect solution, but like it's an
Mhm.
idea to play with, and they could still keep the theming where it's just like, oh, you still have your villain base set, and then we're just gonna have 30 random reprints in here just because we need those into the game and in players' hands, or they could be reprints that are going to
Mhm.
be improving the decks that they are trying to make with some like generic staples or older tech that that deck might want.
Oh,
So,
and yeah, they've been doing that a lot lately with starter decks. Actually, starter decks have been like maybe one of the more consistent places where you can get good reprints for specific archetypes that are being supported.
Yeah, so it's just something to stoop and think on, even though Bandai's likely never to do it because they're perfectly content doing exactly what they've been doing because it's making them money
Yeah.
and that's all that they care about. Um, but I guess like to kind of wrap up the news segment, Digimon is going to be getting another anime next season, which is cool.
Yeah.
Always excited. Have no idea what that's going to be about. But I'm always down for more anime. We're nearing the end of Beat Break, and Beat Break, oh my god, this final arc, it's hitting so hard. Like, it's
I still
so
haven't started
good.
it yet, so
It's so
I'll
good.
get around to it.
Like, I'm not going to spoil anything. But we just got one of the. I guess it's kind of a mild spoiler. So mild spoiler alert. Um, Tomoro is not going to get his mega this season.
That's crazy. You think maybe there's a possibility? I heard some people suggest that there's a possibility that the new Digimon series coming next year would just be like Beat Break 02.
I wouldn't mind that because there's a lot that they could explore with Beat Break. Considering like we know a Tratismon is not Tomoro's level 6 Digimon. So
Mhm.
this like it was from this latest episode. I'm not going to give you any story details or anything around that. It's kind of like similar to the Habakiri spoiler where it's just like, "Oh, Habakiri is a card." It's just like, yeah, we just learned that our Atratus is not Tomoro's level 6. So that means he's going to get a different one when it actually gets shown. Um, but it's not going to be
That's
happening in the anime. So that was a huge bombshell. And I was just like, the reveal of that was so good. Like, they're on fire with Beat Break. If they do Beat Break 2, I would be happy.
I'm glad you're excited about that revelation because it feels like people were more disappointed than anything that in Ghost Game we all knew that Proxima exists and then they never not just Proxima but also like
Arcturus,
Atratus,
yeah.
yeah, Arcturus exists and then they never like even showed them and people were more disappointed than anything. I'm glad that they can pull that off again but make it actually exciting that these animes aren't getting around to actually having these pre-established these lines that we thought that they were going to have.
So that comes down to a communication issue where
Mhm.
the reason why they weren't in the anime is because the animators had no idea, like the animators and the story
Right.
writers, they had no idea they even existed. So they
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
just
No
dirtled.
communication.
Yeah, it felt like they kind of just dirtled waiting for something, and then that never came. Like they waited for essentially nothing, so they were just like, "Oh shit, we have to wrap this up now. How do we do this with what we got?" So I think like that show went through a lot of production issues in terms of communication.
Mhm.
Bandai right now, it's not a known secret. Like Bandai slash Bandai Namco definitely is going through a very rough like internal like turmoil. I don't know
Mhm.
what's going on at Bandai that's making it so rough, but things are definitely not as smooth sailing as we'd like to think. This is just pure Bandai macro level internals. It probably has nothing really to do with any of like the divisions or whatnot, but you can kind of see like sometimes if there's a communication hiccup, it's like very obvious to be like, yeah, Bandai's just going through some shit. What else is new?
Mhm.
Because I don't know if you play Tekken, but like Tekken, just as an example, has been having some massive shakeups. Bandai potentially is losing the rights to make anime licensed games, which is one of Bandai's
Ooh,
which is one of Bandai's biggest moneymakers. So that
their bread and
definitely,
butter, yeah.
yeah, that definitely is gonna hurt in the long run if they end up losing that. Um, but yeah, so not everything is all sunshine and rainbows at Bandai HQ, but we got to make do with what we get, and so does everyone else that works with them. But on other happier notes, um, ban and restrictions. Um, the time that this is gonna go live, which is usually Thursday mornings, um, the ban and restriction list is gonna be literally tomorrow. So we got
Yeah.
thoughts. Other people have thoughts. but more importantly,
Yep.
we have thoughts.
Yeah.
So,
More important,
yeah,
as if we're more important.
yeah,
The thing with like ban restrictions is that this is like one of those things that come and like make people come out of the woodwork to spout their own opinions. So you get a lot of opinions from people like that won't necessarily be like the most. They're just like random opinions, right? It doesn't like they aren't going to be the smartest or like even from always from like the most even necessarily from like the best players. And neither are we. And yet we're still going to be here spitting out our own stupid opinions on what the balance is going to be like.
right. So, where do you want to start? That's the big question, is where do you even want to start with this? Because like my wish list is probably ginormous, but I'm going to keep it as realistic as possible because that's what I feel like is actually more tangible.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing is like for a lot of people, it's like it's split between I don't know. People call their own prediction list either a prediction list or a wish list, and it feels like with most people, the lists I've seen look more like wish lists than prediction lists. Typically, I don't. I typically don't like to view prediction. Speculation on ban lists as wish lists. I rather like try to go prediction mode. I rather like whenever I think about ban lists, I think about like what Bandai would do or what I think that they will do rather than trying to figure out what I want out of them. Because in terms of like what I want, I'm not sure. Like obviously there's some cards where it's like, yeah, that probably should go, but they're not all necessarily the cards where it's like, yeah, I think that's what Bandai is going to do. And I think that's like a big reoccurring thing I've been seeing in a lot of lists is that I've seen a lot of lists post things that it's like, you want that band, but like I don't think Bandai will. Especially considering, if you compare it to the last ban list, I think that one got a lot of heat because there was a lot of that ban list like hit a lot of cards that aren't necessarily cards um, that were the most meta relevant because a lot of things that were on people's shit list were the decks that were very recent. And in general, Bandai doesn't like to hit recent stuff that they're currently pushing, right? So like anything from the last two sets, maybe even last three sets, are probably off the table just based on the way Bandai likes doing things. And yet I still see people, predict like they're gonna hit Cougar or a TB cards like Shishima or ePulse or anything from TS, which is like, yeah, like, do I think those are bad cards to hit? No. Do I think Bandai will hit them? Very, very unlikely, unless something about them and the way they do ban lists shifts randomly this list. I don't think it's gonna happen. I don't think it's likely that we're gonna see anything from GD hit. Nothing from TB except for like in a indirect way. It's like I think Bandai typically likes to hit things that are like stuff that's like old off archetype cards that those decks are playing regardless, because they're so good, rather than in archetype stuff they just released. And I guess like maybe we can introducing this point into like an actual first card prediction, maybe like the perfect example of a card that is part of a huge deck in the current meta that is not part of its actual archetype and is actually an older card that's super generic and easy to abuse is the number one card on everyone's shit list, Nyaroman. That's like
BT
he is
15.
target number one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
BT
BT 15
15.
Nyaroman is basically Dead Man Walking. He's on like 90% of everyone's predictions. He's even in the free space on East's like prediction bingo for the ban list. That's like, the number one card to hit. That's
No, I think that's pretty correct. Because like the big thing about Nyaruman more specifically is not only just the genericness of it, but because of the fact that it kind of just checks all of the boxes in which a card has gotten banned in the past, where it's just like, oh yeah, this is just the easiest way to generically gain memory that's accelerating the game to a state where it's not sustainable for a lot of decks competing against it to do well. So it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, makes it very, very clearly makes sense. Like if Bukomon from BT14 could get hit for probably less war crimes, but still
Mhm.
committing very similar ones, then I think Nyaramon can definitely get hit. Like you can make the argument, oh, but Bukomon was played in more decks. But Nyaramon is just way more offensive of a card than Bukomon, especially at this point in time, where
Yeah.
one memory,
Nyaromon is leagues ahead of Bukamon. It's not even close.
yeah, where that one memory goes a long way, and with the vast amount of like DNAs and other things like setting it up to potentially reuse that ability, is just absolutely insane. So like just as an example of like some of the top decks that used it within the time period that Bandai was looking, we had Puppets using it to buy back turn to
Mhm.
get extra overclocks, which that was probably not on their bingo list of things that were possible to do because they didn't think that people would be using Yaramon that way. And that was a deck that didn't even want to burn its security. It liked its security, but it did it because, hey, I
Yeah.
win the game on turn 2 because of it now. Uh,
Yeah.
then you have obviously the big dog in the room, which is Angels. Um,
Yep.
Angels can abuse it and has abused it, and because Angels has DNA, it could reuse it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nuts. And then it might not be super prominent, but I have seen it in AGO lists just because they could
Mhm.
use it to trigger some of their abilities that, like, hey, when a security's burned, do X, which allows me to then Evo, which allows me to then do more shenanigans and kind of just combo off, just because I'm removing a security, and then the reward for doing that is gaining a memory, but you were already going to remove the security anyway. So it's just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
super hyper generic, and even looking at the future, like if they keep
Yeah. I
Kentarosmon's
was
game
gonna mention
plan,
that.
yeah, if they like
Yep.
keep Kentarosmon or any deck that wants to
And
remove its own
Dynas.
security, then this
And
card just
Taurus
goes
and
off.
Dynas. It's Yellow in general, they keep designing decks where like removing their own security for value is like been part of their strategy. You know, we've had Jupiter lately. In the past, Dynasmon and Kintarosmon has had that as part of their game plan, and they're about to get future support as well. And and even if they hit, I've seen a couple of people like not put Yaramon and instead put like Pegasmon. And one, of course, like I said mentioned earlier, Bandai is just not going to get hit anything from BT6 and EX12. That's like just not our realistic expectation. And two, that just leaves Yaramon open to be abused in future yellow lists, like yellow anything. Doesn't even have to be necessarily Kintaros and Dynas. Who knows what other like new yellow whatever they're gonna print in like the future decks, like a I don't know, a Legion Harrismon could maybe use it. Some of the old what was it? The old Rasenmon liked having low security cards
Yeah.
for their effects as well.
Yeah, it's just a super problematic card for design space. And again, it like
Mhm.
with also how aggressive the game has gotten with all of these abilities where it's just like, and then at the end of the turn, make an attack. Nyaramon is also problematic in those
Mhm.
because now you get multiple ended turns, which means you get that ability multiple times where it generally wasn't intended to work that way. Bandai's clear
Yeah.
thought and indication with Overclock was your turn is over. Cool. You get this reward by making an additional attack at the cost of a token or a specific traded Digimon. Uh, they probably didn't even think about like, oh, what happens if they buy back their turn? And like yellow right now
Yeah.
is the only deck that can do it because of just how poorly future-proof Nyaramon is.
Uh, I can do it too if they find their one of their one of parabolic junk.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, but that's a yeah.
Another reason Nyaro should be hit, I think Nyaro is like on a similar power scale to cards like Parabolic Junk and especially Blinding Ray. I think Nyaramon is just mini Blinding Ray that you're guaranteed to see every game because it's an egg. And
Yeah.
Blinding Ray is a card that I think people are putting on their lists because another thing I think we all want on the list is all the cards that cost 0 on the limited list should just be at zero, which should be banned entirely, right?
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Um,
So hidden potential, Jack Ray, Gravity Crush, Blinding Ray. I think hidden plus Blinding Ray plus Gravity Crush are like the big offenders because I think we've seen those pop up even now more so than the other zero cost cards. But like zero cost option cards were a mistake. Period. Like in general, like I had this thought and I looked at like the list of zero cost option cards. Um, there's like very few of them that haven't seen play, right? Just in general.
no, you're
And
correct.
the
I
ones that
think
haven't
like
seen play were like extremely niche stuff, like what was it? Immortal Ruler.
yeah, and then there was wasn't there like Palmon or Patamon's Confession? I think maybe that was
Oh
one.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it
Those,
was a promo that was released like super early
yeah, the
that
old
like
promos.
yeah, it required you to bottom deck your rookie, which at the time was like incredibly awful on tempo. I think like Agumon had one where it's just like bottom deck and Agumon draw 3 cards. I mean, I
Something
guess
like
like
that.
maybe those cards should be explored
Yeah,
if they're that good because they cost 0.
those cards are the rare exception. For the most part, zero cost options were kind of a mistake, right?
Yeah, no, 100%, especially for where the current pace of the game is. Like, we're already
Mhm.
cascading so many different effects on top of each other, gaining insane value for pretty much nothing. And now you're adding a card where decks draw more now than they ever have, where finding a one of isn't the most difficult thing in the world.
Mhm.
Especially since we also have more ways to dig it out of security too. So that's another thing that people probably aren't necessarily acknowledging is just like, okay, we have more trash recursion than ever, we have more card draw than ever, and we even have security, like the ability to pull cards out of our security in decks that aren't exclusively yellow anymore. So,
Right.
yeah, the game's consistency is like through the roof. Not saying that the game doesn't have like inconsistencies into it. It does. Otherwise,
It
like if
does, yeah.
everything was hyper consistent, then the game would arguably be less fun in a way.
Uh,
Um,
it depends on who you ask. I feel like I've heard from people that say that they want the game to be a bit more consistent, actually, even more so than now. Mainly because like one of like the main like I in our episode where we talked about game speed, I argued in favor of game speed, and one of the bigger like counter arguments to that, which I kind of agree with, is that with how fast the game is, it's more punishing for decks to have like not even necessarily brick, but I have a less than optimal hand, right?
no, that's a
So it'd
fair
be
take.
nice. Yeah. So it'd be nice if like if decks were consistent enough that they can not have a at least consistently have an opening hand that they can be happy with and be and at a state where like they aren't fucked if their opponent goes off immediately, right?
Right. No, I get that. And I think
But at
like
the same
that's
time, you're
where a
also
lot
right
of
that we have so much consistency and draw that it kind of counteracts the just even the notion of limiting cards at all. Um, Speaking of cards that go to zero, another one I've seen a lot of people mention that's already limited is EX1 Melga for very similar reasons. It's just a card that limiting kind of like was almost a slap to the wrist because Garu, not just Garu players, but like Omni players are just like drawing into it and using it anyway.
yeah. And the memory gain can be pretty egregious at times, especially since we're evoing
Yep.
for free and having a hand of like 20 cards.
Mm-hmm.
Just because like the way that deck works is kind of just nuts. I played it a lot on the sim, and the deck is just legitimately kind of nuts. And the fact that it also just turns off all player or opponent interaction is like honestly one of the biggest war crimes of that deck. Because like a lot of the interaction from the game is replacement effects, where it's just like, okay, you
Mm-hmm.
digivolved. Here's this opportunity of time where I now can interact with you because my Digimon saw your Digimon digivolve. Well, if your turn player and your Digimon then says, "Oh, Digivolve again," and then Digivolve again, you're leaving zero
Yeah.
opportunity for the opponent to actually react and respond with the card that's supposed to react and respond. Then the protections that Omnimon gets is like legitimately insane, where it's just like, okay, my
Mhm.
combo is done, I'm in an Omnimon, and all my things are immune. So uh whatever additional interactions you have are basically meaningless. So yeah, I think
I kind of want to have that discussion at some point, maybe some other time, is because like they've been printing out a lot more cards that do trigger off of players just like evolving or playing. Um, but I wonder if maybe the for a reason that they're okay with printing so many cards that do that is because they have so many effects that say, you evolve, which triggers an effect that lets you evolve, et cetera, which means you have a lot of counterplay to those. So there's like could be like a back and forth discussion there. But back to being actually on topic, we mentioned that card now, and I think that's another card I think a lot of people would agree and put on our other lists. Alter S, right? I think we are all in agreement there. Um, One of the things that the balance announcement said was that they're looking at tournament results from March to what was it, July? So basically the past few formats. That was a prominent one from 81 format. There he had a lot of tops back then. And over time, that was probably one of the decks that from that format that managed to survive the shift to BT25 and EX12. And it's still like doesn't get that many tops, but it still pops up here and there,
just
right?
yeah, and it's on the merit that literally the deck is so uninteractive for the opponent. It just doesn't functionally
Mhm.
matter what they're doing as long as they don't kill you before you can pop off. Nothing matters. Like legitimately nothing matters.
Yeah, yeah. So it's probably card number two on, I guess, our official prediction list is Alter S. Um, and when thinking about it, there's another point about Alter S that kind of goes against it that might put it on the list. Um, is the fact that Omnimon is getting support soon, right? We're
Yeah.
getting another Nokia and we're getting more Omnimon support in EX13. I think it might be a good opportunity for them to hit Alter S so he doesn't, you know, potentially overshadow whatever new Omnimon they have planned in the future set because this Alter S is just that much better, right? Like he already did that to 81 Omni. He took 81's Omni's intended support and made it his own because he just overshadows him like by a huge margin. He's so good. He's good at like everything. He's good defensively with his pop and his your ability to evolve into it with Cress. He's super good at offensively because he tends to lead to OTKs with his end of attack self partition effect. So it's like, how do you make a new Omnimon that's as good as Alter S? If not, you just limit Alter S so he doesn't have to be a comparison point.
Right. And when it came to like just the fact that we know Nokia is going to be supporting um that Omnimon deck, they're still going to like have to compete with the rest of the Omnimons that we already have as well. So like what's the answer to power creep this version of Omnimon out of existence? Because like in all Omnimon decks, it's unanimously agreed that this is the Omnimon to play. The only
Mhm.
exception is if you're playing like Royal Knights Omni, where you're just trying to
Right.
use the assembly gimmick to just try to cheese out that Omnimon over and over again. That's the only time that Omnimon is better than this, but in every other deck, in every other instance of like an Omnimon deck, this Alter S is by default the best. And it's very, very there's a reason why it's good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this card is getting unironically reprinted as like what a not store championship regional participation, like it's in uh the packs for that, not the actual participation packs but the event packs, there we go. But they've hit
I thought he
cards.
already had an event pack reprint because I remember getting one.
Yeah. But they've also hit cards from event packs before, where it's just like, oh, we
Yeah,
reprinted
yeah,
this
yeah.
because we knew players would want it, but it's also too problematic, so it's like, oopsies.
Yeah, event packs are a weird way for them to do reprints because they're prizes. Um, so event prize cards the reprints sit in this awkward spot between them being actually reprints that you want and like potentially just being prize cards, like little trophies or whatever. I guess for limited cards, they would have to be leaning more on the them being just cool trophies that for you to win than they are actual effective reprints. Especially because as a distribution network, event packs aren't necessarily the best way to get reprints out to the most widest audience, right? It's a very
Right.
limited amount of people who would get those.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I do agree that Omnimon probably is the card to hit, so that way they could promote more the newer Omnimons that are coming out or that have came out. Um, and it's not like it's impossible to run the other Omnimons. It's like we've seen a lot of the Omnimon lists already start splashing in the EX12 Omni. So it's not
Right.
like it's impossible. It's just obviously this is just the best Omnimon by a country mile.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it'd be more interesting to see if this gets limited, if people still play Omnimon and lean more on the new card, and if that actually still performs well. Because I remember the recent list that one was only on two Alter S and on two EX12 Omni. So
The funny
maybe the
thing
deck survives with one of Alter S, leaning more on the EX12 version, which I think in a way makes us even a better hit because I personally I kind of would like for the most part outside of like extreme scenarios I would prefer hits that keep the deck alive to an extent, make them no longer as insane and dominant, but like not entirely gimped of playability.
So after playing the Omnimon deck for a hot minute on a couple of my streams, uh I still ended up by default using the Alter S because like it's literally Alter S plus one other Omnimon, doesn't even matter what Omnimon it is. Alter S plus one other
Mhm.
Omnimon generally means you could OTK, and the new Omnimon is better than technically a second Alter S because in certain niche matchups and case situations you might just barely not have enough damage, and that's where the new Omnimon comes in, where it's just like, oh yeah, I could just burn a security for free, and it's pretty
Yeah.
easy. Um,
Mhm.
so like I kind of agree with you, where it's just like, yeah, it probably would open up more decks, but it also would like significantly harm Omnimon decks like OTK capabilities. But I guess like, oh no, my Omnimon deck can't OTK anymore because I can't loop DNAs. What a shame.
Yeah, I think like in general, most people would hope from what this ban list is to cut down the amount of early OTKs in the format. I think that's like a common point amongst most people's predictions. And that might be like a thing they are leaning towards in general, because from what I've noticed from like the latest set BT26 is that like with like there's a couple of exceptions like Dantemon helps reboot OTK or helps a lot of app decks to OTK in general. But other than that, there's like a lot less Sec Plus and unsuspending amongst the BT26 decks than we have had previously. At least to me. Do you get that vibe?
Yeah, I mean, you still get like silly mistakes like Nezahamon. Um, but it definitely feels like they kind of just like what we alluded to earlier in our one of our previous episodes on just how the game is changing. It's just like you do your big spicy combo, build your one stack, and then have it get blown up, and then just start hard slamming Digimon to get back into the game while you're potentially setting up to rebuild an actual second stack. And like that's kind of the back and forth dynamic that it feels like Bandai's chasing more, and they can't do that
Mhm.
if the game ends turn 2 or turn 3 due to an OTK that the opponent doesn't really have a lot of interaction or recourse against. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it does feel like they're trying to move away from early OTKs. Um, that being said, I kind of want to revisit the Angels decks for a second there because another card that's on my list right now is Patamon, right? Like arguably, if you hit Nyarama, you might not need to actually hit Patamon on top of that. But like, so I'm kind of like 50-50 split on whether or not we need to hit Patamon on top. But I'm kind of leaning more on towards on like, Patamon is just like a crazy card in general and probably should be hit on top of Nyaramon. Especially because like it's another one that has like a easy to trigger memory gain effect that you can potentially recycle with DNAs.
Yeah, that, and it has the whole silly interaction where it sees itself digivolving, so it's like
Yeah.
arguably better than the current wave of these Digimon can just arbitrarily digivolve for free. Where this is like, yeah, I could do that. It's a little bit more restrictive, but I gain memory for doing that, which is like
Yeah.
extra silly.
Yeah. So that one, it's like I'm 50-50 on whether it's gonna happen, but like it's still there as like a possibility to me.
No, I
Um,
I hated this card since it came out. Anyone can go back to my previous ban restrictions. Like I wanted this card GONE for a while, so like I'm not going to argue or say no, this isn't a bad pick. I hate this card a lot. But that's also just because I hate a lot of like the rookies that are accelerating the game unnecessarily, just like all the Time Stranger ones that just arbitrarily digivolve for free. Um, Not a fan of that.
ah, that is true, but it feels like from my testing, a lot of people are moving away from running those cards in their TS decks. Jupiter decks kind of prefer their Elecmons and especially their search rookies, especially because they already have a lot of ways to cheat Evos and they don't necessarily need to see their free Evo level threes.
I mean, it's a deck to deck basis, but the fact that they exist to me is the biggest problem because one of the things that I was
Mhm.
like internalizing in terms of game design is just like, why are these decks doing so much better than some of the older decks using like training cards, just as an example? Well, it's just like, oh, rookies that are designed like Patamon and like those Time Stranger ones that just digivolve for free, um, they make it so you don't need the training cards, so that means you want to put your consistency in better tools that can get you more consistent. On top of the fact that now that I already have that ability I want baked into my engine, it opens up deck slots to do other things as well. So I think like that's probably just like from a deck building perspective, like where I'm not super thrilled with them is because the existence of those pushes rookies to be more like them, which pushes the training cards out. And the training cards is like right now one of the minor equalizers between uh current and like previous ways that we're playing the game. But that's getting too
Mhm.
deep into the weeds, into like shifts in like bigger other shifts in game design. But I do think Patamon is definitely a card I would want to see gone. You
This
want
conversation is making me think about another card. We're gonna go, I think, on a little bit of a side quest. It's still related to this ban list, because another thing, a big topic of discussion are resulting surrounding this ban list is cards potentially be unhit,
oh
and
god.
one that's like I think on many people's lists, Greymon X, right? So Greymon X, personally, the more I think about it, the more it's like, yeah, no, this card is actually, it was super overtuned on time of release, but he kind of reads a lot like what a card would do if it was released today. He reads like a modern Digimon card, right?
I I
And like,
get that.
yeah. And one thing I was thinking is that like, yeah, a lot of decks can like have a lot of cost reductions built in that, and this is one is, archetype specific, which is a lot like a modern card would. So it's like he kind of would help Greymons catch up to the rest of the modern archetypes if he came back. But then I thought about, what if he's still on the list? Because it might be a bit too much if you combine him with another rookie that enables a free evolution. One that hasn't actually seen that much play at all. It's or as of late especially. There's the BT14 Agumon that also lets you evolve for free if you have a tie on start of main.
I think the biggest reason why they probably wouldn't bring this card back probably is because of the sheer amount of power creep that's already in the game. to where the idea is, hey, if we're ever planning on doing a Greymon deck in the future, now they're going to go backwards to this card, and we don't want players to go backwards. Like, that's my, like, my we're in full greed mode Bandai perspective of it, where it's just like, we don't have to bring this back because we want them to buy the new card, and this wouldn't let them buy the new card. So like, if they probably print like a new Greymon X antibody in the future, then now this is fighting with that, and now that's competition that they don't necessarily want to see.
Okay. I was going to plan on having this conversation later, but I have a different perspective on this, and it's going to get into like what I think about unhits in general. Um, in general, it feels like okay. So a lot of people would list, this card or that as cards that can be unhit, and usually it's something along the lines of they can unhit this because it'll do nothing. But then I'm thinking like, okay, well, if the card would do nothing if it gets unhit, why would you want it unhit? Like, are you that excited about like, yeah, bring back this card. I can't wait for it to have it again and not play it. Right? So in that case, it's like, why even bother unhitting it? And like, and the fucked up thing about that argument is that like it can't go the other way because it's like if it's a card that would affect the meta, if it gets unhit, then why would you want it unhit? Then it's even worse, right? Um,
Yeah.
so in that case, it's like, but that doesn't stop Bandai from unhitting cards. So I have to think about why would Bandai ever unhit a card? And in that case, I think back to the most recent ban list where they unhit Mak Galgamon and Sunrise Buster. And then the answer is right there. They unhit cards to not support, but to like advertise their new stuff that they're supporting, right? They're
Yep.
supporting new Data Squad cards, so they unhit Macgao and Sunrise Buster. So I think that if they're going to unhit anything, it's got to be something related to something that they are planning on releasing. And what do you know it? Next upcoming set after B226, X antibodies. Well, first Royal Knights, then X antibodies. So I think in that line is thought, Greymon X should be or can be on the list. I think that's like actually a realistic expectation to think that maybe Greymon X is viable for an unhit because it would, again, support slash or slash advertise the new X antibody stuff that it can go into.
I mean, it's not unreasonable, like you kind of just were stating, where it's just like, it could literally go both ways. There's arguments for and against it, where it's just like, okay, it's not really going to matter. The game is so fast that this is just an average card at this point. But
Mhm.
at the same time, it's just like, oh, but if things are going to get better and Bandai doesn't want you playing older cards, but they're using older cards as advertisements, like it's a lot to digest. It honestly is. I'm okay with it coming back
Yeah.
personally, just because like, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I don't necessarily think the majority of the cards on the ban and restriction list, outside of a handful, realistically need to stay on the ban and restriction list just because of how much power creep the game has actually gotten. And I think that's a problem in of
Mhm.
itself, but at the same time, it's kind of always been that way, where it's just like out with the old, in with the new. The new is going to arguably be way more powerful than anything old, and it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
a
yeah.
couple of like outliers from a design perspective, where it's just like, oh yeah, because we could set this infinite combo up, we're obviously not going to let this card come back. Just something silly
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, so I agree with the fact that like a lot of the stuff from the ban list is unhittable, but they don't. So I'm really on the mindset of like, if you're gonna predict something is gonna be unhit, I feel like you're gonna have to find like a justification, like saying they're gonna unhit Greymon X to help push the new whatever X antibody Greymons they have in the X anti set. I think there's a bunch of really good ones that we can like point out in the list that, as we could as like potential predictions for unhits that relate to that. Like another big one was like I think I've seen lots of people cry out for Shoutmon Cross 4 to come back. which I'm kind of iffy on. Like, yeah, it's
I
probably fine in the context of the current card game, um, but it was when it was around, it warped the meta around itself for sure. So, um, I think that maybe the real reason why Crossfire won't come out or won't come off the list, at least not on this upcoming list, is because there's no cross heart support in the upcoming sets. Wait for a ban list that's right before one of those, right before a cross heart set. Then they can come. That's the one that you should call out that they're going to bring it back for.
Yeah, I think like unrestrictions definitely are way harder to overall justify. Which is why Bandai's been using it mostly just like kind of like what you said is just advertising. Otherwise, I probably am not
Yeah,
expecting anything that actually got hit to ever come back,
yeah.
which
I
I'm
mean, I
also
think there's a
okay
lot of them
with.
to have like that you can like call out as good advertising. I don't know if you want to like pivot to that topic for a little bit before going back to the main one because it still relates to it.
We could pivot. That's fine. What are you
And there's
thinking?
like I mean, it feels like a non sequitur to an extent, but like looking through some lists, there's a couple of like standout ones. Doru Greymon, I think he's an X antibody Digimon. He relates to Alphamon as well. He's occasionally part of his line, and Alphamon is getting support as a Royal Knight. He's not Chronicles traded, which makes him a little awkward in that deck, but that also makes him kind of even better in that sense. I think that makes him even more adjacent to the Makagalgamon that got unhit, right? That one didn't have Data Squad support traded.
Yeah, the protection
So I
at this
think
point is like not insane either, just because it's like,
yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
we have complete and utter Digimon immunity that's slapped to a lot of
Mm.
cards at this point. So it's just like, oh no, I can't have my DP reduced. What am I gonna do?
Yeah,
S-
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's another thing I was thinking is like that protection was crazy when it came out and for a while afterwards. But now that effect is kind of mundane in the context of the current card game's power scale.
Yeah, it's mostly the
Um,
security attack plus because like four of these cards means that you could like Doru Gray into Doru Gray, and now you'll Digivolve into whatever Mega, and it's gonna be able to do 3 to 5 security in a single hit.
mhm.
Or like
And unsuspended.
divided by 2 hits if it's able to unsuspend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's like the only
But
argument not to get it back, which is like again going back to the philosophy of like I don't think Bandai's trying to print a whole bunch of degenerate OTK decks. It's just they accidentally do it, just because they're not
um,
thinking of specific interactions.
yeah, I guess that's another topic. Is like if you want the ban list to cut down on OTKs, then why would you want to unhit cards that represent more OTKs? But I feel like they're going to always print new cards that will enable some OTK. I think the big thing is trying to avoid ones that happen too early. And then as long as they ensure that whatever Alphamon stuff they print is not going to like they can OTK. I think decks should be allowed to, as long as they, don't allow them to do it on like literally turn two, then it becomes should be fine. And that being said, Grand Kuwaga is probably also a good target here because if Brandis is in the next antibody set, then yeah, Grand Kuwaga should probably come off. If not, then they'll probably ignore him again because they won't have a reason to bring him back.
Yeah, I think
I
like
think an interesting one to
Gabumon
discuss
X.
is Gabumon X. Yeah, I was just about to bring him up because like we have a lot of searchers nowadays that let you pick up two cards. So is Gabumon X that much scarier as a that much scarier as a searcher compared to those? Just because he can search for or dig for pick up two? Because I think still even comparatively he's still a lot stronger because he looks at four instead of three, and he's a potential zero cost over a rookie at a raising.
Yeah, I
But
think
at the same time, yeah,
most of the war crimes were committed by the level 4. So
yeah.
I think like out of any of the X antibody mistakes that they've made, Gabu is like one of the least offensive ones on the current ban restriction list.
There is an argument to go back and forth on whether or not Gabumon X can pick up any X antibody in name, which might be a bit too generic when we're about to get an X antibody set. Um, that helps it like be more playable potentially in an upcoming X antibody set. Uh, but that might mean that he might be too generic and might have to stay on the list then. Because
Yeah,
I remember him being a lot of play in Levia because he can pick up, your Dober engine proto form. You saw a lot of play in that deck. But Dober X and Cyber are gone now. So
yeah,
that could be good enough reason he might not feel as crazy. And we discussed earlier that like Garu has been like in the dumps for so long that he kind of needs to have a bone thrown to him. So maybe if they have Where Garu or Metal Garu X support plan for the set, do you think Where Garu can come off? Do you think he's mundane enough?
uh and no, he can't come off. He's just like he's just an enabler for more OTK strategies, kind of similar to Doru. Why, like, I think the bigger issue is why Doru Gray's not coming off is because it just facilitates more OTKs. And like, sure, it doesn't have the cost reduction things that the modern game has, especially on like promo wear. But the fact that a lot of Garurumon cards can just multi attack really easily, and you could just keep going up and then just getting extra free attacks. That's probably the big reason why he's not coming back. Um, and why I think like something like Doru Gray probably isn't going to be coming back either. I think like kind of just going back to your advertising thing. I think like if they're going to try to advertise X antibodies, Gabumon makes a lot more sense. Even though like yeah, Alphamon's going to
Yeah,
get
for sure.
support, but it's just it could cause potential design issues down the road, which is like why they wouldn't do it. Like it, consistency boosting, sure, that's fine, I guess. There's so many things in the game that already are making things hyper consistent, so it's just like it's the least offensive thing that they could do is just like, oh, this just makes a deck a little bit more consistent. But kind of like
Mhm.
pivoting back to the ban and talking about Garurumon, um, I think there's one card. It has nothing to do with Garurumon, but Garurumon was abusing it, and because Garurumon's abusing it the way that
All
it
right, back on
is,
topic.
yeah. Because Garurumon is abusing it the way that it is, means that it could be primed for other decks to abuse it as well, which is going to be Mad
Mm,
Leomon from BT15.
yeah,
Um,
that's a good point. 'Cause when I was gonna bring up Maglio, I was probably gonna immediately say it's the card itself is a. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how else to put this. Mad Leo's kind of mid, outside of the crazy loop. He hasn't done anything up to this point, and he has like really awkward specific Evo conditions again over Leol and Elecmons that we don't see a lot of play. So he feels super awkward. So I was
so
gonna suggest that maybe we only do a pair ban with Were Garu. But do you really think that like even with a pair ban, there's gonna be a future deck that could potentially abuse him in this way?
yes, because of BT10 Mad Leo. So that's the whole gimmick. Is not necessarily just because of Mad Leo himself. It's the combination between both of the Mad Leos because you can hard play BT10 Digicrossing with the BT16 or yeah, BT16 Mad Leo, and that's how you put them underneath to then set up a DNA because that Digicross only costs 3 to do. So you could like set up a level 4, move out of raising, hard play Mad Leo, tuck Mad Leo, and then just start DNA looping into pretty much anything that is able to use his colors. It's more specifically the Medleo's colors from BT16, but like it's just a card that's like super uh abusable by DNA looping. And I think like that's the big
I
issue with it.
guess. But the reason why he was able to DNA loop with Garu is the fact that for some reason, they gave decode to it as an inherit, which they can enable with its when attacking. Um, which is kind of like where Garu is like kind of different from like a lot of previous DNAs in that sense, right? Because up to this point, we've seen cards that have like partition or what, the thing that what was it, Shaco and Sophie had, which had like the pseudo half partition that was all written out. And if I
Yeah.
remember correctly, for both of those, it's it's worded as if it's like, I know partition is other than by your own effect, right? So it does not let you, using that video would not allow you to play out. Yeah, yeah. And Sophie and Sheka also say other than by your own effect. So like the moment they accidentally slipped up and gave decode, which does trigger by your own effect, is when Mad Leo became a problem. And I think they can like design around it in the future. And
So
without
is
it
the hit
being
where
that much
Guru?
of a, I mean, like I said, pair ban, right? Like, do we need to do more than a pair ban? Do we think that Mad Leo would become a problem in the future? Or you think like, oh, they're gonna realize that they messed up with by giving it decode and, go back to Ole's DNA cards only having the other than by your own effects, and which is not like that big of a like a design around that they have to do. It's like we talk about how we need to ban cards so they don't have to like constantly design around futures cards or design future cards around them. This is like not that big of an ask, is to make sure future DNAs don't have decode.
Uh My big issue is Bandai's not good at learning their lessons, and this might come from the fact that they keep changing their design team. I think this is the third
Mm-hmm.
iteration of like the design team lead changing. So it's just like they're very clearly not writing
Well,
things down and passing it on to the
he's a
next person.
he's the producer. I don't know if that counts as design team lead. I think
Um
even East about that to point out that the producer isn't necessarily the card designer.
they could influence it in a
Yeah.
sense. It
You're
is
not, but you're
different
not wrong that
rules.
the design team lead probably the design team in general probably has shifting team members at points. Um, so yeah, I just feel like it is potentially a card that people just like the team or whoever's working on the cards could potentially forget about in the future. So maybe a limit and or ban is much more warranted than a pair ban.
I'm just like
Probably just
trying
a
to
safer
think.
way to go about it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think like in design school, one thing I was taught was to try to stupid proof as much as possible. And like if I'm trying to stupid proof a design team, um then Mad Leo would be the card I would want to take out so that way they don't have
Yeah,
any reason to think, "Oh, level 4s or level 5s when they die can replay level 4s." And if multiple come out in a DNA based deck, then they could just DNA for free. And then because DNA resets the state of the Digimon, they get an extra attack, and that could cause further issues as we've already seen. So it just feels like to stupid proof the design team, um, it's the card to hit. Plus, it's like the least defensive card to hit too. So like I know if they hit another Garurumon card more specifically, people will riot just because they always
I
make
know
good
they're not
Garurumon
going to.
cards.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I see that
literally the
point.
meme. So I think like it's just the least defensive card that they could hit to keep Garurumon like the DNA Nature Spirit or Nightmare Soldiers Virus Buster one playable because they're obviously not going to hit that. Um,
Oh, obviously not.
yeah.
Never.
So it's just
Not
a
never,
card.
but like,
Yeah, and with like any future Bagra support, this could also be looked at as like something that they could use to abuse also, or like I don't know. It just to me feels like it's the most stupid proofing.
I think whatever they did, if Braga ends up playing this in something future, it probably won't end up doing something that like insane like you would with the current Garu loop. I feel like he's a little mundane there. But yeah, I think I agree. I guess I'm now on your side here that we limit and or ban Mad Leo to avoid any more potential shenanigans with him potentially enabling DNA loops. Um, Maybe now we go on to maybe the topic I was dreading the most talking about, which is 3M being, you know, the best deck of the BT25 meta, or the most topped deck of the BT25 meta. So it's almost certainly not escaping the ban list unscathed, right?
According to people on the interwebs, it's probably the deck that's most likely going to get a ban and restriction in some capacity. So I
I think
don't.
second looked like me next to Angels, but like
Yeah,
pretty close.
and it was
They're
still
fighting
doing
for first.
yeah, it was still doing decently well even with TB existing as a deck. It was definitely not
Mhm.
doing as well, but it still existed just because of just the rock paper scissors nature of where that meta ended up developing.
It's a really strong deck.
Yeah.
So the question now becomes like, what do you hit it? Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, nothing from the past two sets, right? We're not hitting Bielstar directly, or not hitting, or probably not going to hit Forecast Asuna. We're probably not going to hit um, Black Gato. The funny thing about this deck is that that still leaves a whole lot because this is technically an older archetype that got updated. So it has a bunch of older cards that you can consider. I think it was one of them I've seen a lot of people mention, not just because it's in this deck, but also because it's in a bunch of other topping decks, is Asuna, because hitting Asuna here could potentially both slow down 3M and be an indirect hit, or not an indirect hit, but also a hit to other PS decks that are using it a lot. And in general, just like it's a card that's being seen a lot of play in general. You know,
I think it is a good card to not only just curve Beelstar but curve TS as well. Um
mm,
just because again, if it's shutting out people from wanting to play newer cards, then that's something that they would have to look at, and this card is old enough at this point to where it probably would see some like kind of like it could see some kind of restriction. Plus, as we've kind
yeah,
of like highlighted, trash recursion in a lot of decks that generally wouldn't or shouldn't have trash recursion is just kind of nuts.
yeah. Maybe the one thing I might be questioning is like, is BT24 actually old enough for it to be considered? Like, yeah, I guess it's like 3 sets ago, but that's like still only 3 sets ago. And it still means that Asuna is part of an archetype that is currently being pushed, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So like maybe they might not want to consider it for that reason.
I think an
Um,
option just makes the most sense. To be
yeah,
honest, like if we're just playing it like super hyper safe, is like just hitting some option is like the play.
yeah,
You mentioned before that like you don't like obviously red bind triggers the option people would want to hit, but um
yes, that's the one I've seen most people call out for is red bind trigger. And I have complicated feelings on this because I definitely have stated in the past that I don't like the idea of hitting bind red trigger. It's kind of like I don't know, like a philosophy slash principle kind of thing to me. Um, but seeing just how many people call out buying red trigger, I've been kind of like rethinking my stance on it. I've been trying to like reevaluate why I don't like the idea of hitting it, and sort of just coming to terms with the fact that like Bandai might just like listen to the loudest voices in the room and hit it. Um, because like I said, it's like a I don't know, it's like a viewpoint sort of thing. I I think decks need ways to end games, right? I think games need to end, and I think good decks need ways that they can use to make sure that the game ends. I don't like it when games just sort of grind and last for ages. I'd rather have good. I'd rather have good decks that can, like, there should be, of course, there should be some back and forth, but it should be like, back and forth until one person finds a game finisher and ends it, right? And to me, Bind Red is 3M's game finisher. So like if they lose it, it's like it's just against like my philosophy, I guess, on how a deck should be designed. Um, of course, reevaluating it. I guess BL Star wouldn't necessarily entirely lose their ability to end games without it because they still have X. It would be considerably weaker without it.
I
But
I
it'd still have a finisher.
I think without bind red trigger, they just start shifting to use level sevens instead. To where it's just like, okay,
Well, I
I'm
was
just
gonna
gonna use
bring
a
that up.
level seven
Yeah,
to get the extra attack anyway. So it's just like I don't necessarily think it matters. I think like obviously you're more of an expert on the deck than I am, considering you have way more practice and time on it. So like the big thing with Beelstar being a purple deck is obviously limiting one of the options to one just decreases the amount of times you're going to be seeing it. So like if they limit something like Hurricane Screw Shot to one, uh them having that memory deficiency, I don't know how important that is.
I
So
think it's very important. Like if I was to make the call, I would still say screw shot. But I definitely see a lot of people argue against hitting screw shot over bind red, and I can't tell if that's because they just legitimately think that bind red is such a problem card that it needs to be gone, or if it's just that you know they're tired of seeing Bielstar win one too many times and just wanted to see the deck gone. Um, and to an extent, like I think the deck could survive losing Bind Red. Like it would lose its ability to OTK, but not necessarily its ability to end games. Um, but then, like, what is your game plan, right? Like, people will like to say, will probably say it's like, okay, it'll turn into more of a control deck. But like, do you mean control deck as in it actually a control deck or a deck? I feel like I've seen a lot of people say a deck is control deck to mean a deck that has no win condition because it feels like I don't know. I've been testing Titans a lot, and it feels like that deck not having a way to OTK. Maybe it's just like I've been so OTK pilled. I don't know how to play a deck that doesn't OTK anymore. Um, but like I don't know. It feels like I struggle without a deck without a way to end games would struggle, and I would think that BL Star it wouldn't necessarily. It kind of have to shift its playstyle a little bit. I think it can still play as a control deck a little bit, but like I think a modern control deck would have to do something like what Jupiter does or what TB does, I guess, and that's like put up a board that does stuff on your opponent's turn and or stuns things and is annoying to out and Baelstar just simply doesn't do that. Like they have a counter timing effect, and they have like an on deletion plus and or Satella has like some pseudo protection, but that feels like nothing, honestly, in the grand scheme of things in comparison to a lot of the modern decks. Um, so it would I feel like I agree that the deck is probably just gonna have to lean without bind red, it's gonna lean a lot harder into using its memory efficiency to like go into toolbox level sevens, sixes slash sevens that um, stun slash interrupt the opponent in some way. So it's going to be a lot more ruin mode spam, a lot more talisman, and now introducing Juno Hysteric to that list, and maybe some other cards they can potentially splash, like Chronomon for anti trash stuff because they can just play TS cards. Um, so yeah, I just come to the terms of the fact that like, you know what? Fuck it. Hit bind red if you want. Well, the deck will probably fall off, but I don't know, we can probably still make it work to some extent. But I still think that screw shot is a fine hit. Let the deck OTK, but it won't be able to OTK on turn two, which I think is the big thing. Um, just I agree with the notion that we should cut out turn two OTKs entirely. And I think hitting screw shot and maybe if you add Asana on top of that would be more than enough to stop that from being a factor in BL Star.
yeah, it's really difficult because again, these are all modern decks. So, like, obviously, Bandai doesn't want to kill the modern decks because they literally just printed them. And that's kind of like the unfortunate reality of like where Bandai's sitting in terms of power creep, where it's just like, okay, if the modern decks are the most powerful decks, but they're causing the most problems, what actually do you then hit? So like I
Yeah.
do it's a really complicated problem. But I think between either Bind Red or Screw Shot probably is just good enough to maintain the deck for the most part in of itself. And kind of just like what we were saying, just to reiterate, it's like losing bind red just means you're going to have to figure out other ways to deal damage, and the easy and most obvious one is probably just run more Beelstar X's to get that effect more consistently, and to just run more level 7s. Like that's probably the easiest thing that you could do. um
Yeah.
and the deck is
Oh, there's
also
another
getting
thought.
support with Gundramon too, like
Yeah.
Gundramon dual card.
Yeah, and that would help probably push the deck into another, like, more less OTK, more control position. Again, I think control strategies are kind of flimsy because they tend to rely on sticking a guy that may not have enough protections to actually stick. And I feel like Bielsa might fall into that if they don't lean harder on cards like Ruin and Juno that apply lingering floodgate effects or lingering debuff effects. Um, but who knows? It might be just be fine surviving that way. It'd be kind of like it might end up in a similar position where Sakuya ended up after its ban list that hit the hit its OTK combo, right? It
Right.
managed to just barely stick around by turning into a ruin spam deck.
Yeah, and
Imagine if
then
they also hit ruin, and it's like, okay, then what does Bielsa do now? Actually, I guess it becomes Juno spam.
yeah, I think we're at a point where it's just like ruin mode, well, it still feels like an incredibly shitty card to go up against. Like it's only really bad if the opponent's able to like hyper turbo into it to be able to shut off raising plays and also have enough damage to be able to win the game on the crackback. But otherwise, like based on the way the game plays, like if I move out, do my thing, and then you go into ruin mode probably isn't doing anything. So like it's very time window specific in which ruin mode is actually good. Otherwise, ruin mode just feels like another card. So I reasonably don't think that they're gonna hit ruin mode. Even though from a personal standpoint, I would want them gone from the game. I just don't think Bandai's gonna do
Mhm.
it. What I do think Bandai would do is analog youth. Um,
Oh,
I
that's a good one.
I hate this card so much just because of how long this card has been around and how many degenerate strategies have came using this card, because it is one of the cheapest
Mhm.
searchers in the entire game that also fills up your trash, which now more than ever you're getting rewarded for. So
Yeah, they've
like
been printing assembly more than ever. That's a mechanic they've been focusing a lot more on lately.
Yeah, so like obviously they probably aren't really going to be caring about TB's results as much. Granted, like yes, TB is kind of just a huge meta force as of right now. They probably just don't have that
Massive.
much data to be going on based on the time window. But I do think like just for a future proofing perspective, like analog youth is basically a mistake waiting to happen. And it's been a mistake waiting to happen because it's been played for years. um, and I'm not saying it needs to get hit because it's been played for years. I'm just saying because of the hyper acceleration of the game and the mechanics that they're making, it makes this card even
Yeah.
better than it ever has been.
Yeah, because they have, like I said before, they've been doing a lot more assembly as of late. It feels like that's a mechanic they've been focusing on a lot lately, and they've also been doing a lot more execute. Surprisingly, like I've been seeing that keyword thrown around a lot more than you would expect, right? It surprisingly pops up quite a bit. And Analog Youth loves both of those, especially if you have both. Um,
Yeah. I feel like
it
just
is
analog is it's just time to
Yeah,
sunset them.
it's probably is time to sunset him. It kind of relates a little bit to the fact the reprint discussion is that this is also one of the cards that probably got reprinted the most in the game. Maybe not the most reprinted, but one of the most reprinted cards. It has like 4 or 5 or so. Um, so hitting him now would mean that they would no longer they'd have a reason to stop having to do so many reprints of him because he's a card that keeps popping up a lot.
They've only
And he's
had
popped up a lot in decks that
2.
I've played him, so it feels weird because it feel seeing him potentially go feels like seeing like an old friend leave because it's for the last times. It's like he was such a buddy to me for so long in some of my decks, and now Now he's about to. I think it's about to be his time. It's a complicated feeling because like I more or less agree too, especially because of the fact that like I think TB is a deck that's on a lot of people's minds in terms of like things that should be hit, but like I said before, they just don't hit new cards almost ever. That's like a thing that just Bandai almost never does
Yeah,
for the most part. So Analog Youth is basically the one card from that deck that is like a target to hit that to slow down TB even a bit. Um,
yep. No,
yeah,
I think like out of all of the cards that are currently being played in the game, and a lot of the top decks, like Analog Youth probably just like literally makes the most sense. He doesn't have that many reprints. He's got a couple. About half of his reprints literally were like special events or like whatnot. His most notable
oh,
reprint literally was 8001. But
the
that's
thing is
more
that like
recent.
special price card reprints is how they do a lot of their reprints in general. But the
Yeah,
fact that he had the champion stamp plus was it World Convergence bonus pack and special event and then as an event pack, it's both the same art, but the two different ways to get it, and the 81 card. That's like four four
yeah,
reprints. It's quite a bit in
yeah.
comparison to other cards, especially that don't get nearly as much of this much attention.
No, I just feel like overall he was just a very poorly thought out card that released arguably way ahead of its time. And
Yeah.
now it's just time to have him go. And like when it comes to like looking at Bandai's current design philosophy of like, oh, we're just making a lot of these like super archetypal based designs, this is one of those cards where it like reaches outside of it into like super hyper generic territory where
Hmm.
there's like no reason to run it in a lot of decks, and that's why he's been played for so long. um so it just makes sense for him to go because no other card in the
Yeah.
game does what he does. And the fact that he's white and a tamer and costs two is like literally just icing on the cake. Like it's almost the exact same like type of mentality why a lot of people wanted Cool Boy from BT9 gone. But the big
Yeah.
difference is Cool Boy was only for X antibody decks, where Analog Youth is at this point in time literally for every single deck. Granted, yes, not every deck is going to want him, but like the fact
Yeah.
that like just as an example with Dantemon, because he has assembly, people were thinking Analog Youth for Dantemon, even though it's not that great of a card for Dantemon. It's just a trash hyper accelerator, and that inline is part of the problem. If decks don't have a built-in one, then they turn to Analog Youth.
Yeah, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt to see him go, but like he does more or less check all the boxes and what on what the on factors that make a card put on the
Uh,
ban list.
e-
Generic, used in a used in a meta deck, could be abused in future decks if even if you hit the meta deck, etc.
uh,
He just hits all those boxes.
yep, older card.
Yeah,
So
older card.
So like it's the least offensive. Like they're obviously not gonna hit anything from TB. So like this is the only realistic thing that they could probably hit from TB.
Speaking of decks that use analog use, I'm gonna miss using him in Millie. Maybe we can transition that into a discussion on Millie because I don't think we need to hit it, especially if they do end up hitting analog youth. But I've definitely seen it more than a couple of times in other people's prediction lists.
I I don't think Millie is that bad. What I do would like a card I would rather see go rather than like Millennium Mon, even though I do think like that promo is kind of just disgusting. Um I would probably, speaking of promos and being disgusting, I would rather see the promo Destromon go just because that card's like
Um,
legitimately insane. But I know that would pretty much kill on the spot Galacti, and that's something my friends who play Galacti don't want me to say. So hopefully they're not listening to this. But I hate
I don't know.
Galacti.
I can see it. I think I can see hitting Destro killing Galacti, partly because like for a while I was like maybe one of the reasons to roll Galacti is just because like they have such efficient team removal in the form of Destromon. Um, but it also isn't a card that's kind of central to their game plan as much anymore, right? Because it's like the the game plan of Galacti right now, is like, at least to me, it feels like is to go into your big immune Galacti, sit around and be immune, and then set up for the OTK with the Ragnarok cannon, um, which Destramon, whether Destramon is there or not, doesn't really affect things. It just makes it so you're just better at shutting down your opponent because you kill their tamers off.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously Galacti right now is making a big resurgence, mostly just because of the immunities that it has. It's still relatively slow-ish. It's more of like my opponent's gonna mess up rather than me actually doing the thing I need to do. So it's just like my opponent will just accidentally play into some of my Galacti stuff, and my Galacti just like again is just going to come down, be immune, and then just sit here and wait for Ragnarok Cannon to just win the game. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
And
like
there's
I've
surprisingly fewer outs to Galacti just eats matchups where they just don't have an out to an immune Galactimon. Because there are ones that do, but there's surprisingly quite a few ones like in that are meta relevant that just don't have an answer.
Yeah. And that's why he came back, especially in the face of like TB, where it's just like TB doesn't really have an out to Galacti, especially if he has high enough DP. Then the Susano can't swing over him. They don't have option removal, and because they're going through their deck so quickly, it just makes it so that their own game plan is going to backfire if they see they're one of a BT15 APOC.
Mhm. Do you think
So
Apex should be at 0? Because I think I've seen at least one person point out that, like, oh, if we're gonna hit things because they're limited to one, and I think it was like he made a list of like cards that are limited at one but still see consistent play, so maybe they should put it at 0. APOC is one of those.
I would
Specifically, maybe I
agree.
guess because
I agree.
yeah, because APOC keeps showing up in like Galacti lists. He's in a position where even as a one if he keeps showing up. So yeah, maybe Apocally goes to 0 as like a potential thing for this list.
Yeah. I think that's gonna be a little bit less frequent of a thing people are probably thinking about, even though like I do think that is a very reasonable take. Like there's a lot of cards at this point that are on that ban and restriction list that should just straight up be banned. Just because like again,
Yeah.
Grave Recursion is so much higher in terms of how we're using it now, and all of the different reach that decks have, where it's just like seeing a one of is no longer a one of you as long as you see it. Then you could just keep reusing it over and over again, which is the exact reason why Matt got banned. But like we have a whole bunch of other cards in the game that just let you reuse the same card over and over and over again, and I feel like that's pretty egregious, and Bandai doesn't necessarily know how to mitigate that very well. And yeah, I just there's a lot of fixing to the ban and restriction list that probably should be going on in terms of actually banning cards at this point, past the zero cost options in APOC. But APOC
Mm,
also, like the weird thing about APOC, which I eventually want to do like a whole separate podcast episode about, is like the APOCification of the game, where it's just like, again, if the idea is we're going to build up into one stack, do our thing once, and then just start hard slamming level sixes, like that's basically APOCization. Like you kill the APOC once, and then you play an APOC, and then you have to kill him over and over again. And yeah, that's kind of just exactly where the game currently is. It's just replace APOC with insert level 6 here because assembly, or because it has built-in cost reductions for various different conditions.
yeah. At least
Which
some of
again,
them, a lot of the assemblies that we have been getting, they aren't as egregious as APOC because they don't always also act as their own, win condition because he mills your deck out.
yeah,
I think
it's
maybe Susan counts as one, but like even he isn't like, the end all be all for the deck. You still do a lot of the heavy lifting with the other TB cards.
yeah, it's more so just the idea of the fact that like APOC was the most generic one, where like obviously assembly is like way more limited. And sometimes, like when you're playing like Time Strangers, like you just won't have inheritables, which could be its own downside in of itself. So it's not like it's like pure apocization. It's just when you're able to have that card be its own win condition, then it starts to hit more problematic territories like Susano, where it's just like, okay, I'm just gonna slam Susano over and over again. It's gonna die. Then it's going to replace itself, and then hey, look, all the cards that I used for it are back into the trash. So now I can hard slam Susano again. I feel like that's where things start
Well,
becoming a little bit more of an issue.
well, Bandai's already kind of addressing that because they're beginning. It feels like they're beginning a lot more cards. Um, I mean, I don't know if to say a lot, but like they're pushing more cards that are anti-trash, that undo people's trash setup. So we got Chronomon Holy Mode coming out. And on top of that, people are building their decks to be anti-trash too. We've even seen a shift, or not a shift, but like we've been seeing a couple of results lately where people are teching in anti-trash cards into their existing lists, like seeing Gulfmon in Bielstar and Merciful Mode in Glowing Dawn popping up now and at the end, just because of this what seems to be a pattern now of like assembly being so good, right?
It's just it's partially assembly being so good, but it's also just again the ability to reuse the trash for more than just your average purple deck
Yeah.
is like legitimately insane. So it's just like, oh, the trash is becoming more and more of a problematic zone in a sense, because especially like the slopification of like archetypes, where it's just like, okay, purple is just one of the colors inside of this archetype, which means now I just randomly have access to pretty much everything in my trash. And like I did funny enough, in one of my few top performing videos of all time, I did call out the fact that trash abuse was something that was going to be a problem in the future, and lo and behold, we're hitting the point where it's like now it's
Mm.
actually being more front faced and forward. I don't like
I
to toot
mean,
my own horn about that, but like I do find it funny that one of the things I called out specifically was trash abuse.
you say that about the game now, but it feels like trash abuse has been um a hugely problematic thing for like a lot of the metas in this game, and not just recently. Stuff like Growl Loop and Serb Engine, or just, I guess Lilith Loop in general, has been a very heavy trash abuse deck as well, to an extent.
Yeah,
I feel like it's been a thing. It's like whenever there are, I mean, and it feels like in most games, whenever trash abuse gets too far, it ends up feeling really problematic. Not just Digimon.
no, you're 100% correct on that. Like the trash being used as a extra zone or resource usually leads to problematic gameplay patterns. Like just again, magic example is reanimator strats. Like that's been a thing in the game
Dredge.
for like ever. Dredge. Yeah. And don't even get me started on Yu-Gi-Oh! Because their trash is a second hand for the most part. Um, so we're reaching that saturation point where it's just like it's more prominent now than ever versus like, oh, this is limited to one specific color, which there's maybe
Yeah.
only a small handful of things that are allowing us to do that. And now it just feels like a lot of things are able to do that incidentally because they have a card in that one specific color. It's like in Atmon, just as an example, one of the changes that I'm going to be making to my Atmon list come Dantemon was trash recursion. Why? Well, I want to reuse my Dantemon and I want to reuse my reboot mons that end up going into the trash. It just makes sense. It's like, oh, the thing that's in my trash that I need at this given moment that I could just grab back for free, why wouldn't I do that? So, like, that it is just
Mhm.
becoming more and more prominent. And what's Reboot Mon's colors primarily? Green and black. Well, now he's purple. So now he has access to trash recursion.
Yeah, it's probably like the big reason why trash can feel like more of a problem now than it has in the past. Because when it used to be, it's no longer limited to purple decks. Assembly is a mechanic that isn't really tied to any one color in specific. So we have decks from all sorts of colors getting use out of it. And like I said before, a lot of decks are getting trash recursion generically just like it just to make it archetype tied. A lot of decks, despite not being purple, can just grab their pieces from the trash.
Right.
So yeah, I guess it really is leading to a close more and more Yu-Gi-Oh-ification of this game, right?
And it's weird because like it is and it isn't. Like Digimon is still
Yeah.
is like its own game with a lot of its own unique
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mechanics. But like we are getting into like more combo heavy centric archetypal based like a more archetypal hard lock stuff that sometimes can use like generic packages to be able to do way more than what Bandai initially designed it for. So like there's a lot of parallels. I don't
Yeah,
know if
yeah,
you
yeah.
watched the video that I saw or I sent you.
I
Um,
was gonna get around to it, but I haven't gone around to it yet. I do want to.
it's a really good video about like how magic is slowly turning into Yu-Gi-Oh. And like it's so funny because Yu-Gi-Oh is just such an infamous game for like being the power creep game where it's just like no
Mhm.
game wants to be Yu-Gi-Oh, but all games try to be Yu-Gi-Oh in a sense. In terms of gameplay, it's very weird and like hearing uh the like power creep in magic trying to be more like Yu-Gi-Oh is like just the most mind-boggling thing ever where it's just like I never would have thought that would have been a rational discussion ever. But
Mhm,
as
mhm.
far as like other bans or limits, I think like what we have is like already pretty good. Where I don't necessarily think this is going to be a super big ban and restriction list because again, all of the problematic cards are the new stuff, and Bandai doesn't want to hit the new stuff if they
Yeah.
can avoid it. So like what we got: Nyaro,
Um,
Pada, Mad Leo, Alter S, Asuna, Analog, and Redbine.
I think yeah, that's all the ones that we've mentioned so far.
Yeah,
I guess Destro. Do we want to add Destro to that list because we both kind of agree there? Or
I
are we? Or I make him 50-50 on Destro. It's like, yeah, he's part of a deck that's kind of meta, and yeah, I think he's kind of annoying, and he's like, I kind of hate running into Destro and getting my tamers popped. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, Galactic players would probably be really, really sad about it too. And it's like it's not like that it's not one of the most prominent decks of the meta.
No, if anything, I think like more so the problem with Galacti is the Snatchmon. I think, not the one that allows them to OTK. That's fine. They could have that. It's the Digicross one. The Digicross
Uh,
one allowing you to Digicross from your trash is like legitimately stupid. I mean, it's no different than assembly, I guess, at this point. So it's like, is it really? But like, do we need an assembly on a level 4? I don't know.
I think it's fine. It gives them like an ability to continue to play the game after they get wiped. So I guess like they already have that since the new Snatch has assembly, but like I guess options help. Or it's nice to have options. Speaking of, it's like we talk about how like typically it's usually the older cards that get hit. Um, what is one of the oldest cards that in Galactic that's still being played? I think my mind went to Fusion Eyes as me being potentially a hit target for Galactic. That's like is a hit but isn't like a major hit. I wonder if maybe if they do hit Fusion Eyes, he ends up being upsetting to everybody because people who would want Galacti to be hit would probably want to get hit harder, and those who do actually play Galacti would still be really, really sad to see their Fusion Eyes gone, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't play Galacti enough to really know and pinpoint like what the card I would want would be. Obviously, knee jerk reaction playing against it, it would be the Destro because then without it, they
Mhm.
can't pop the Tamers, which means that their matchup spread is a lot different because now they don't have that Tamer interaction that they used to. Um, so like the Destro to me would make the most sense, but I realistically don't think that they're gonna hit Galacti considering he's only just making a recursion now because of the
Mhm.
matchup spread changes. Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like we pointed out earlier, one of the biggest things was the matchup spreads. So we have
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
a
I agree.
pretty conclusive data set when it came to BT25's overall meta, and Galacti was a prominent deck, but not like super prominent. Obviously, like Medusa, it was still outperforming it, and it was on par with like Red Hybrids, Olympus 12 Control, and kind of Shine to an extent, even Millennium and Alter S. But like the big thing that was keeping Galacti down was bears. Like, to be honest, it was bears. Just because bears would be able to fight over the Galacti, they can't protect themselves well against it, and then they would just die. And then with their Galacticon, they have to reset, and that takes time, effort, and memory that they don't have to spend because Bears is breathing down their throat. Plus, the Talisman recursion also allows them to have some kind of board retention, even though they do have de-digivolve against it. It's just sometimes they can't de-digivolve it when they need to. Um, but yeah, so like looking at the data set, we went from Three Musketeers, Angels, Glowing Dawn, Volcanus, Bears, and Jupiter being the top decks to going into BT26, TB, time, Three Musketeers, Angels, Volcanus, Glowing Dawn, and Galacti. And then I guess technically Jupiter also. So we went from like 6 playable decks to 7 playable decks, with the spread changing just because Bears got significantly worse due to TB's existence.
Mhm.
But
Consider this. Fusionize is technically a zero memory card.
I'm not gonna if there is a Galacti hit, I'm not gonna say no to it. I honestly, I'm not. I hate
Okay.
Galacti so much. The fact that the new Galacti has like just ungodly immunities towards everything is just hyper obnoxious. And then obviously Galacti being a control deck means kind of just what you said. He doesn't really have a win condition. His win condition is
He
hoping the
does.
opponent doesn't.
He does. He
He
has a Ragnarok cannon, which is a lot more than a lot of other decks that people call control decks have.
which is why he's the only control deck that's been doing good. Um outside of like
Well,
Olympus 12
depends on
control.
your Olympus 12. People call TB a control deck.
TB's not a control deck.
I've seen
TB,
people call it that.
it's so, I mean, a lot of decks, like, it's so funny when I talk to new players where they're just like, oh, I like control decks. And I'm just like, this is not the game for you. He's just like, really? It's just like, all I want to do is delete my opponent's Digimon. It's just like, okay, every Digimon deck does that. So which one do you
Yeah.
want?
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
really confused. They're just like, wait, how does every deck just remove things, but not every deck be a control deck? It's just like, no, it is a control deck in that aspect. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
so weird.
Yeah, back on topic. I do have a couple more cards on my discussion list.
All right,
Um,
shoot them off.
Real quick, Uko and Crimson Blaze, just because they get included a lot. Um, I don't know how to feel about them. I think I'm fine seeing them go at this point. I think there a while ago I'd have complained about people asking for Uko to go because I think he's kind of mundane, but he's also I don't. I'm currently not playing a deck with Ukomon in it, so I'm kind of like fine with seeing him leave at this point because he is super generic, right? We talked about this earlier that cards that are like too generic are probably on the docket in the first place, and Uko is like maybe one of the most generic cards that have ever existed.
I'm okay with seeing Uko go just because I always hated the card, even though I'm an aggro player. Like, it just helps try to accelerate things to an unhealthy degree. And like, it is just the biggest crutch card that it feels like Bandai is not designing around anymore. And by crutch card, I mean like, oh, these archetypes that they have been designing because they've been leaning harder into archetypal design or like slap design, whatever you want to label it. They don't need Ukomon just because they have more tools to play with. And Ukomon was just the crutch where it's just like, I don't have enough rookies. What do I play? Oh, play Ukomon. Um,
Yeah,
and I felt like that was like, obviously decks now are just way more powerful to where like you don't realistically need Ukomon, and Ukomon is just that generic filler trash. So like Ukomon can stay in the game, but I'm not gonna like say, oh no, Ukomon shouldn't go just because accelerating your trash is like insane. So I'm thinking of like
yeah.
Ukomon
I'm
in
kind of
like,
in the same boat.
yeah, like Ukomon would be a card I would potentially want to see in Dantemon, like as a deck. And like when I'm saying
Yeah,
I want Ukomon in my Dantemon deck just because it allows me to accelerate my raising area, I'm just like, Okay, maybe I'm taking back wanting to use Ukomon because I want to use what? The Atmon stuff in my Atmon deck, not
Yeah.
Ukomon. So, yeah, I'm not against Ukomon going.
All right. How about Crimson? Crimson, I'm also like, it's like it's a tech card that outs specific decks, but it's also just been seeing a lot of play as of late in general. So I'm also wondering if maybe that might put it on the docket in some way.
Oh, Crimson Blaze is really hard for me because it's just one of the best removal options that the game has ever seen. Mostly just because it has a floodgate effect attached to it, where almost not a whole
Mhm,
lot of others do. Uh,
mhm, mhm.
and it also has a built-in cost reduction, which again, not a lot of options do. Um, so like,
Yeah,
I think Crimson Blaze can arguably stay just because we like if you're trying to use it for its floodgate effect, you have to use it preemptively, which sometimes can
yeah, makes
bite
sense.
you in
Yes.
the butt. And you're what, really hoping this card just screws up the opponent out of a security play, which now we're burning security, so it's less likely to happen now. Like I was playing
Yeah,
Medusa into TBs, and the only time I was actually winning against TBs as Medusa was when Crimson Blaze was hit straight out of security. It wasn't when I was using it, it was just a security bomb that just happened to win me the game because now their Susanomon isn't going to spit out an army of Digimon, which gave me time to breathe.
yeah. I wonder if maybe Crimson Blaze might be a necessary evil, especially as we get more and more decks that are able to just spit out massive boards and give them like Digimon immunity. Like Cyrus Bacchus was looking pretty good coming out of this set, so maybe we need Crimson Blaze to keep that for people to have options to be able to tech their deck to beat it.
And
Maybe one of the better reasons to like even consider a Crimson Blaze hit is because of how ridiculously good it is in Medusa, where in that deck it turns from a tech card to a lethal card because you just set up to actually make it kill your opponent.
yeah, and
Um,
Medusa also has end of turn, just make an attack. So I don't know.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
maybe if that's the case, it would. I hate using choice restrictions so much, but like if that's the case, then I would probably just choice restrict it because like
I
the
was gonna
other.
move on to like talking about like maybe we consider an actual Medusa head because if we want to talk about decks that were topping from March to July, it's Styraco, I think. Medusa comes up quite a bit. It's a deck that not only people were upset not to see it in the last ban list, but we mentioned earlier it was never going to be in the last ban list. It was too recent at that point, but now it's not. And now the question becomes: is it still good enough to be considered hittable? And like that's iffy because like on one hand it's no longer like the face of the meta, but at the same time it's like one of those dark horse decks that still manages to creep its way into top 16s like every regional just about. Like if you like go through the list of regionals, there's going to be like a Medusa in like the top 16 like just about every time, so it's still like doing work. And I think
I
it won a regional recently too, right? Where
I
did it rank?
I think Medusa is fine. And I'm not saying it just because I have the deck and I like playing the deck. I think for the big shifts in how we play the game, Medusa is one of the least offensive things that you could be doing. I think anything Time Strangers related is significantly more powerful and way more oppressive than Medusa.
Mm,
Medusa has some decent matchups into some of the stuff. But when it comes to kind of just those modern game isms that we keep referencing, it's slightly behind the curve when it comes to that. So it's a slower deck in comparison. So it's just like, can Medusa is forced to use very specific tools in order to have a chance, and the deck has been teched accordingly to be able to try to fit within those modern game isms. Because, like we said, the big thing is you build your stack once, you do your stack's cool thing, and then you expect it to die. If it doesn't die, that's great, but you're expecting it to die and you want to have some kind of recovery play. Well, take away its recovery plays, and then the deck just basically falls apart on its face because now it actually can't play the game, which is where a lot of the older decks are at this point. They just don't have recovery plays, so they just functionally can't catch back up.
Mhm.
If they're not just straight up OTKing the opponent and winning the game on the spot, which Medusamon can kind of do. It's just really difficult and requires way more setup than what it's actually worth. So, like, I don't reasonably think it's just like hitting rocks at this point. Like, Ben did
Yeah.
absolute numbers with rocks, and rocks had a small little recursion. Just because it had like some decent matchup spreads into some of the top decks because of the fragment ability, which is exactly the same reason why Metal Empire was doing well, was because of that type of stickiness that it had. But I don't like, as dumb as Tumblemon was, I don't think Tumblemon's a card to hit. And as dumb as the Lamia from BT21 is, I don't think that's the card to hit
Mhm.
either. I think those
Really?
cards are just too needed. I mean, I guess technically you could make the argument for Tumblemon, but I digress. We're not OTKing with an OTK deck anymore. That's how fast the game has got. Is too much pressure to where we can't OTK with a deck designed to OTK.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know how to feel one way or another about Lamiamon. I can see it being hit. I also don't think it's something that you have to go at it. It's not like an obvious card that to hit. Not what I mean by that. What I mean by that is that like it's not like Banless prediction. Oh, this needs to be hit. It's like Lamia is not like a must get hit, but I can also see it being hit because it's prevalent. So I'm not sure how to feel about it one way or another. So that's why I want to ask your stance on it as well.
Yeah, because we've
Um,
seen the data for Medusa. Just Medusa started dropping like a rock. So like Medusa in BT25 was the seventh best deck, and then come around to BT20 or not BT26 EX12, it's like tied for 9 or 10. So it's like losing its grip on the meta, but it's still able to be somewhat playable. So I'm expecting like by EX12, Medusa probably isn't going to be hot shit. I mean, it already isn't hot shit, but it's going to see significantly less play as less people would want to play it in favor of newer and shinier things that are also being able to be just as strong and reasonable as Medusa.
mhm. All right. Now I want to bring up a card that I'm really conflicted on a number of ways. Um, we mentioned earlier, what was it? We talked about how we want to look at the decks that have been topping. Of course, a lot of them are like way too recent, so and a lot of them don't have like a standout old card to target. So maybe we have to like look at as far early as BT24
I think
for things to hit
BT24
out
is
of
on the
them.
table.
Yeah, and if that's the case, like a prevalent deck in the current meta right now is Volcanus, surprisingly. And that is a very new deck with mostly very new cards. Um, but it probably would be on the docket due to its performance. And I think I've seen a lot of people call it out. Um, so it's like, what do you hit out of it? And it's like, do we really hit Dan and Cannon? That would also like side hit some of the other really strong TS decks, but like there are like some arguments against hitting Dan and Cannon. One of them being that like they're trying to push TS as an archetype right now, so probably that we don't want to hit for that reason. But the really big one that comes to my mind is that it has a reprint coming in LM9. That was actually the card I was alluding to when we were talking about reprints. This is what another thing that makes that reprint really awkward is that like, oh, they're gonna reprint it in a way that guarantees everyone's gonna get, not everybody, but like a lot more copies of it, and it's gonna be a lot easier for you to have like a playset of it. And are they now? It's now like on discussion to be potentially hit on the ban list. So like, I don't know. What do you think? I'm like conflicted on this card for that reason mainly.
I've hated Dan and Cannon since it came out. I think this card was absolutely one of the biggest mistakes, and I think the idea was fine. at first, but as we got links and now we're getting like even more Time Stranger support, uh it just feels like super problematic.
I
It's
agree.
only problematic in the fact that it is literally doing what Dan Yuki and Canon Yuki are doing combined, because that's literally the point of it. Um,
Yeah,
because like without Dan and Cannon, you can't play the option and get an attack right away, which, as we've seen with a lot of these options, they just need to deal just enough damage, and then they just Dan and Cannon to basically act as Blitz Omni for game, because they what? Use their field option, goes into
yeah,
security, plays out a Digimon. Digimon now has Rush because the field is or another Digimon is giving it Rush, and then Dan and Cannon just allows it to then just make an attack. So it's a
yeah.
like the big thing that I hate with the and then just attack is how memory agnostic that a type of ability is. And Dan and Cannon rewards you for more memory you spend. So like obviously um Title Stream would be a card I could see potentially getting hit if they weren't to hit Dan and Cannon, just because
Now the
of the
problem,
unsuspend. But that's about
yeah, but
it.
the problem with that, no, but they're that would do nothing because, oh, not nothing, but they're about to print Cross Arts, which is another option card that allows you to unsuspend your TS cards. So that feels like a really, really, really weak hit to Volcanus at this point.
No, you're
But
right.
yeah, I agree that Dan and Cannon are like more than strong enough to be hit. My only question then is like, is its status as a card that's about to be reprinted um, going to potentially stop Bandai from putting it on their consideration, right? Because
No, because
like I
they already
said,
have your
the-
money.
oh fuck, you're right.
See,
Ah,
they
fuck
already
you,
have your
Bandai.
yeah, they already have your money. So now you could use the four Dan and Cannons in four Time Stranger decks instead of all in one Time Stranger
Uh,
deck. Yeah, it's that's the yeah, I know. Trust me, I'm not super happy about saying that. But that's like
okay.
that's
I'm
true
still
in
at
a
the
lot of
point where they haven't
sense.
shipped the product, so because it's we're still months away, I could demand a refund from LM9 in protest to them. Well, I probably wouldn't, but in theory, I could, demand a refund for LM9 in protest to them limiting Dan and Cannon, and on top of that, gutting BL Star because that's another reprint that's planned. So like that's what I'm thinking is like, would they want to avoid that scenario and then not hit Dan and Cannon, even though I agree that Dan and Cannon are absolutely warranted for hits.
Yeah, that's the tricky part, and that's like stuff Bandai probably has to
Yeah,
think about themselves.
yeah,
Where it's just like,
yeah,
okay, what can like obviously this is a problem, but like we backed ourselves into a corner because now there's
yeah,
monetary incentive involved.
yeah. That's like why I wanted what I brought up in the beginning, why I dislike most prediction lists because they feel more like wish lists than prediction lists because they don't feel like they consider what Bandai would actually do, and that's like my goal tends to be is like thinking about what would Bandai actually do, and that's why I'm so conflicted about Dan and Cannon here because yeah, it's such a good hit all around. Uh, they already they already printed cards that do its individual jobs, separately. So you're not really losing out on anything there in terms of like the game losing certain effects. Um, it's ridiculously strong in Volcanus, and that's the deck that's strong enough to potentially warrant hits. Um, it's a crazy card in general in terms of how it leads to lethal lines and various TS strategies because of all the ways you can get rush. But there's the reprint coming out in an LM set that hasn't shipped, and therefore, I haven't checked it whether or not I can actually even demand a refund for it. But you know,
If you could, that would be hilarious. Because again, Dan and Cannon is probably one of the most powerful Time Stranger cards that they have printed all the way at the start of it. And as we kind of saw with like Hoodie, um, like they waited so long on hitting Hoodie just because of when Hoodie came out. So I feel like Dan and Cannon being 8 months in the meta, just like Hoodie was 8 months in its meta, I feel like it's probably okay to let Dan and Cannon go. It's just The sucky part is just the reprint, but they can't. I mean, they should have predicted that Dan Cannon was just a cracked card. But
Mhm.
um, that's neither here nor there. Because like the whole point on shifting towards archetypes is to be able to spot problems easier. But instead, it just feels like Bandai's just using it as an excuse to be able to make more problems more frequently. And like, I don't know, it's just super goofy. I think it's a card worth hitting. Do I think that they're gonna hit it? Probably not, just because they want to still try to sell Time Strangers.
Yeah. Okay, let me see here. I'm in my order history. I can see my order. I want to see if I can potentially. The order cancellation period has ended.
See, they already have your
Sneaky,
money.
sneaky. They already have it.
You'd have to fight with your credit card company at that point.
Maybe I could. Payment method PayPal. I can probably see if I can like demand a chargeback or something. Obviously, that's probably a bad idea for various reasons. Like I probably get blacklisted from them and stuff. But like, I probably personally, I probably wouldn't do it. I'd probably just be sad. Um, but I can imagine a theoretical person that's angry enough to do that, and that being a thing that Bandai might want to avoid.
I mean, I personally wouldn't be above it, but that's me. Like, if I was that mad,
Mhm.
I would not be above that. I'd be like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
F this.
All right. I think I only have like two cards left that I want to really discuss.
All right,
There's
what
the
you
whole
got?
Palamon interaction.
Oh, yeah,
So I think some
Palmon.
people mentioned the whole Palamon with Petermon plus Pomu or some other card that says suspend opponent's Digimon when to become suspended. Could pull off a combo similar to what Ko and Sayo could do.
Yeah,
Um,
I also think even Palmon in general, just the fact that, like, a lot of almost every green deck was using this card just because it is just another one of those, like, hyper generically good cards.
mhm.
Because we saw it in Vortex, we saw it obviously in Bloomlord, we seen it. I've even seen it a little bit in Bears, just because they goad the opponent's Digimon and force it to suspend, and then it does that thing. Because it's until
Yeah, yeah,
their
yeah.
turn ends. So it's just like you
Yeah,
could
same
start off
agree.
with Palmon, Digivolve into like Digivolve all the way up into your uh Great Grizzly, force them to attack, then they lose the memory, and you get your evolution and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a one-time thing. The thing with Petermon is that you can theoretically have it happen in turn after turn, so that like yeah, it does pull off a Ko and Sayo style, or yeah, Sayo and Ko style infinite turn combo, though are probably arguably harder to pull off, especially since it happens at start of opponent's main phase instead of start of turn. So they might have like some start of turn actions that could potentially interrupt the combo.
Like an
Um,
Asuna.
like an Asuna, yeah, Asuna play out Agemon to DP minus,
Yeah,
right? So I'm wondering if maybe like what do we could we possibly see the first ever instance of a card being limited in some way before its release and a pair ban Pal plus Peter?
I doubt it.
You doubt it?
I doubt
Other
it.
options include limiting Palmon entirely just for this one discretion. I know that the card seems pretty strong in general outside of that, but like it's almost never been part of like some like huge tournament winning deck, right? Because partly because green struggles as a color in general.
Yeah, green only really started to make a resurgence just because of like Vortex and Bears having the fight ability. So
Yeah.
like that's literally the thing that's making green like somewhat playable. Even though deletion is
Yeah.
still obviously like the worst thing that you could do to the opponent's Digimon, with all of the replacement and like on delete type of abilities. Plus if they have retail, then you just like die to retail on accident if you don't have protections yourself. Um, but I think Palmon won't be on this list. It might be on the next if the whole Peter
Yeah.
thing is that threatening.
Yeah, that might be just the thing. They just sort of let it go and then watch what happens and then respond to it later.
Yeah.
That leaves me with our last card. Atomic Inferno. This is an interesting one because, for one, yeah, Red Hybrid does pop up in top lists here and there. And this would be a decent hit to those, but that's probably not necessarily exactly why. It's probably part of the equation of why. Probably the other big reason is that because Red Hybrid players are now playing Nejamon.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
Is that whole interaction?
Yeah, because the buff applies as long as the Digimon in that state is a hybrid, and this is just cheap enough to where you could use it pretty much at any stage. And because, again, Nezaha has at the engage, which is just another form of at the end of the turn, make an attack agnostic of memory,
Yep.
really helps push this to where it's just like, oh, I could use this in combination with that to basically make Nezaha cost what, 1 or 2 memory total to evolve into and make an attack and unsuspend and potentially keep turn. It's
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad hit, especially since it does also lower the offensive capabilities of hybrid decks in general. More specifically red
Yeah.
hybrids. So I'm not like against it. Do I think it's realistically gonna
Mhm.
happen? Probably not.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. It's probably a fine hit, but I'm like, I don't know if Bandai is that cognizant of wanting to hit it for that reason. Um, so I'm like also like on the or sort of like this unsure spectrum of it.
Because Red Hybrids is, again, one of those decks that's only coming back in the resurgence that it has. Not necessarily just because of Nejamon, but because of TB in a nutshell. Like the way
Yeah.
that TB forces the opponent's reactions lead to Red Hybrids having a positive experience into that matchup because it's like, okay, you Susanoo my board, and then what? I spit back out a whole bunch of tamers, and then I just Digivolve back right up, and then my Digimon also just so happens to have Rush. So yeah, it just makes it pretty easy to fight against Susanoo. And that's what Crosshearts is doing as well, where it's just like, okay, my tamers will just retain some Digimon because of material save, and then I just go right back up again. Like I just hard slam my Digimon, make the attack, and we're back to square one. So like if
True,
anyone's
true, true.
curious why those decks were doing good in um EX11, that's literally the big reason is because TB is that prominent. Because looking
Okay.
at Japanese data, we haven't really talked a whole lot about Japanese data just because I think Japanese data is worth way less than it used to be. Um, going
Kind of
over
a weird statement to say.
well, so it's because they just play locals. Like they're good barometer at like gauging what decks are topping locals a lot, and like you could find some like really weird off the beaten like meta, not really meta, but like rogue decks or like not even rogue decks that have like spiked to small locals environment. But like TB has a ginormous lead over every other deck in the format, and it's like by a
Mhm.
very large margin. It's not even close. TB has about 60 decks that have won their locals throughout the EX12 format, and then right underneath that is just Atmons in a general sense with like 20 decks. So like there's a 40 deck gap between first and second place, and SW what's this one?
Well, I don't
Uh
think like it's not like JP
Galacti.
doesn't have like big tournaments to pull data from. It's just harder to find for us English speakers, harder to find that info as opposed to just going on to CG guides and seeing all the locals data.
Yeah. So cuz they're really weird about their data, and like at least they have CG guides that basically just pulls from Twitter, like a Twitter hashtag, and that's how it gets it. So CG guide isn't like 110% accurate at all. It's just, I
Yeah.
mean, none of the metametric sites are accurate, none of them, but it's all we got. But currently, the other top performing decks is SW, Galacti, and Glowing Dawn. And then when it came to last format, you had Beelstar, which had about like 51 decks showing up. Then under that, you had Glowing Dawn, which is about 45. Then you had Three Angels, or not Three Angels. You had Time Stranger Angels at about 42. Then you had Bears at 33. And then you see a gap uh, where Atmon is 20 again.
Mhm.
So moral of the story is play Atmon because apparently they're good. No, it's literally just Rebootmon for the most part. Rebootmon is just so cracked. He's so much fun. I love him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But app shilling aside, um, it just feels like even looking at Japanese data, um, a lot of the decks people are playing are still the newer decks, and like, are they reasonably going to hit anything from Glowing Dawn? And if they do, what's the card? And I just don't see it. I really don't.
Yeah. No, everything they have is too new to be
Literally.
considered. It's like it's a weird situation here, and I can almost guarantee there's going to be people who are going to be bitching and moaning and complaining that this ban list doesn't do enough because it didn't specifically hit GD, even though based on the way they do ban lists, they weren't going to in the first place. Um, if I'm wrong, I'd be excited, right? I'd be down to see a GD hit just to like blow our minds and us being completely wrong on how we think Bandai does their lists. But it would be it still would be like a breakaway from the way they've been doing lists before, right? It's still something that like if you want to do like a prediction, you got to predict the way you got to look at the way that Bandai does lists and the way they do lists. GD is probably going to get away scot free.
Yeah, GD, a lot of Time Stranger. Yeah, like they're really good at picking the problems. Really good at picking the problems. It's just I think right now because they're printing the problems and there's not a lot of like residual problems
Mhm.
that is left. I personally think this is going to be a relatively tame ban list. Even though yes, obviously there's a lot of in quotation mark issues that they could try to fix to make the game an overall better experience. Obviously, the last ban and restriction list and all of the actions that Bandai has done has led me to believe they're in full greed mode because I think they understand that Digimon is a matured game. So there's not that much gain out of it left because the only
Mhm.
people that are here are Digimon fans. There's
Yeah.
no TCG shills to try to like, or TCG grifters to try to
God.
attract. We don't have the most robust collectors market outside of those who are fans.
Mhm.
So they're
That
just
makes
trying
sense.
to
No,
milk
that's
us
a good
for
point.
yeah, they're just trying to milk us for all that we're worth, and I feel like the ban and restriction list is just a way to try to coax us into playing a lot of the newer strategies and curve some of the older decks with problematic cards.
Yeah. I think it's kind of sad because it's like I have another card here on my list that I wasn't going to talk about. It's Aegiamon from BT24. And I'd love to see him go because I feel like in my testing, the new Jupiter decks are like insane. Um, but because they are pushing us to try to play those decks, they're not going to touch anything from that, and especially not Aegiomon. At best, maybe Asuna and maybe Dan and Cannon if we're lucky.
Honestly, out of anything Time Stranger, that's probably it. Is like Asuna and Danon Cannon are the most deserving cards. Um,
Mhm.
because otherwise, like Time Strangers all just plays with itself. So it's just like what you get rid of in between theater. Well, at that point, you might as well just ban every memory boost. It's just like certain things just
Yeah.
don't make sense to do. So I think these are the two biggest defenders when it comes to Time Strangers, outside of just my own personal pure disdain for the free Evo rookies, which I know we're not using in super high quantities because you do want to have a good mixture of like searchability and playability.
Mhm.
But yeah,
I think that's losing.
yeah, I think our list is still a little bit ambitious because like I still have Crimson Blaze and Fusion Eyes on here. Um I I don't
You know, those in there. Those are like suggestions.
yeah,
I like the
I
idea of it because, like I said, it's like a zero cost option. It's kind of a low key hit, but I'm not expecting it. But
no.
I think it's plausible.
Yeah, so right now on the list, just to kind of start wrapping things up and rounding it out, I have
Mhm.
Naramon from BT15, Patamon from BT14, Ukomon from BT16, Mad Leo from BT16, Omnimon Alter S, the good one, Dan and Cannon, Asuna, Analog Youth, and uh, Bind Red Trigger.
Yep. It could
Even
be
then,
either
this,
Vined or Screw Shot, but I
yeah,
think
Bind
the
Red or
loudest
Screw
people in
Shot.
there. But I think the loudest people in the room are gonna scream for Bind Red, and anything like Bandai might is probably going to capitulate to that.
I think Corkscrew is the correct card at the end of the day, but some option that they are spamming more than
Yeah,
others is what they're potentially going to hit out of Beelstar.
yeah.
But outside of this list, I don't really see anything else. Like, there's arguments for a whole bunch of cards, as we've kind of already
Yeah.
stated, but
Oh yeah, let's add zero cost options to zero.
yes, zero cost options to zero is a borderline must at this point. And
Yes.
like we could have a whole separate episode talking maybe next week. What we could do is like actually looking at the current state of the ban and restriction list and be like what should be banned and what should maybe come off. I don't know.
I wouldn't mind having an episode where we just go through every limited list and then go back and forth on whether or not it's a card that could, I guess, A, come off, yes or no, or for some of them would be put to zero, yes or no.
Yeah. I mean, that
That'd
might
be a
be
fun one
fun.
to do next week. Yeah.
Because that'll give us the opportunity, obviously, to a talk about the ban restriction list outside of like everyone already doing their own individual videos that they're already doing with their predictions. Um,
Yep.
but actually, like break down the reasonings and just try to understand some of Bandai's logic more, and just be like, okay, based on the current state of the game, what's going to change from the ban and restriction list on top of, I mean, granted, it's being fused with a new set coming out, so don't exactly have that answer. Um, but just trying to see what should actually be gone that's not gone.
Mhm.
I think that would be a fun thought experiment.
Mhm.
So, but I'm excited overall. It's really weird being excited for bans and restrictions because it's like cards are becoming less playable and I'm happy for that and I'm just like, is that something to
Well,
celebrate?
cards becoming less playable means other cards could potentially become more playable because they don't have that to worry about because of the power level shifts,
Yeah.
like
No,
matchup shifts, I guess.
that's fair.
So that's a positive way to look at it.
Yeah. We definitely need some curving, some meta curving.
Yeah, that's why I'm not feeling as excited as you are probably are for this ban list because it's like, yeah, I'm probably going to be losing my ability to play Beelster super effectively, and I've been trying to find a new deck to pivot to, and I've been eyeing Titans, but my recent tests of Titans have not gone very well. It just doesn't feel like it keeps up with everything else, and I don't think a ban list would help them because it's like the decks that are I feel like I'm struggling with are like mostly new stuff like Jupiter and Chronomon and stuff like that.
Knowing Bandai, that's probably by design.
Yeah, but it's an ultra rare, man. They should have made that. I mean, they should have pushed harder.
The real question is how's your reboot mod matchup? Oh,
Admittedly, I'm not doing this nearly as much testing as I should be. So I don't have as big of a wide knowledge base on how I do it against everything. Maybe I ought to hit you up sometime to do some more testing if you're available.
that's probably okay. I'm not entirely opposed to it. Right now, just to kind of like give my streaming schedule. I stream on Mondays, I stream on Thursdays, and I stream on Saturdays. And then obviously we have this on Wednesdays. So,
All right.
little peek behind the curtain for everyone. But yeah. So, any final thoughts when it comes to ban restriction announcement?
I think I covered everything I wanted to say.
No, I know this was definitely a super long episode, but
Yeah.
hopefully people really enjoyed it, especially like the deeper dive into the conversation as far as like why we think the way that we think, and logically speaking looking
Mhm.
at the meta, like what reasonably should and could go. So but yeah. So I think we're gonna wrap up here for today. Thank you everyone for coming out and watching. Again, I know this was a really long one, but that's just because there was a lot to say on just this one little topic. So
Yeah.
thank you, thank you, thank you, especially if you made it all the way to the end. I do have our list posted right up here as far as unbans. It's just down here. Not really that much. But it is what it is. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Tell us any of your thoughts down in the comments below, and we will see you all later.
Mhm. Good night.